Okay, so hopefully I am being heard. Can you guys hear me okay? Or let me know if you cannot hear me. I honestly don't know which one's better. I don't know if using or going live directly through YouTube is better, or if going live through like the streaming software. I know that it's a better experience going live through the streaming software for me as the person on the other side, but I don't know if YouTube gives a preference to creators that go live using um, the YouTube app. So that's going to be interesting. So let's give a couple of minutes for hopefully more people to show. Y'all, I'm excited for today's topic. I think that it's before Christmas time. I know a lot of people are maybe doing some traveling. You might be spending time with family, or you might just be chilling, relaxing at home, catching up on some rest and things like that. So either way it goes, it is totally fine. I had the live stream on both sides, but I feel kind of weird. Like I feel like it's strange to be live streaming on YouTube, like to have two separate live streams on YouTube. I feel like it would just confuse people potentially, even though I'm tempted to test it out. Can y'all hear me okay? I hope you can hear me because I feel like I'm talking and I'm just like talking. I feel tempted to test it out, like go live on the app and then also use the live streaming software. But then I'm a little bit nervous to do that because I feel like that would just thoroughly confuse people as to what's happening or what's going on. So we're going to be talking about the brutal truth today, right? Like, and I feel like this is going to be vibes for 2025 for the most part. Just having to enter this new era because we talk a lot about, especially on the podcast, we talk a lot about, males and how destructive males are, the things that they do that make no sense, the patriarchy and how destructive that is and that has been for humanity, really. So we talk about a lot of these issues. And one of the things that's always kind of poked at me is that we don't really go too much so far. We haven't really been going too much into where to go from there. And both, I feel like both are important, both are necessary for growth to take place. And I've always wanted to give both sides. Like I don't want to just focus on the cluster chaotic disaster that is today created by the patriarchy, but also where to go from here. And I honestly, and I think you guys might have heard me talk about this a little bit, but I honestly do feel like where we go from here is highly dependent on whether or not you are independent as a woman. And I think a lot of times what I see is that women really just don't understand what the meaning of independence is, what the meaning of being independent is. And it's not really their fault. I think, with the word independent, that has been weaponized against women for several years by males, by the patriarchy. So women have kind of internalized a lot of negative connotations to a word that was originally supposed to or meant to empower them. And so I think that that's a lot of where the confusion comes from for women. And so why am I saying that? I'm saying that because it's not about it's not about whether or not you need someone to be with you all the time. It's not about whether or not you're going to be around someone all the time. It's really more in depth than that. It's more in depth than, are you going to be with someone? Are you going to be married or not married? And if you're not married, then you're more independent than the next person, right? It's a little bit more in depth than that. So I think that women have really been conditioned to believe that, you know, these surface level meanings and definitions are what make up being independent. And so going into 2025, I think it's important to start talking a little bit more about what that actually looks like and what the answers actually look like, right? Like, I agree to a good extent, like living by yourself and having your own things and not depending on like a marriage or whatever the case may be does factor into independence. And it does a lot of times show or mean that you are probably more independent than most, because to do all those things by yourself, you have to be independent, right? In order to accomplish those things. But when we're trying to kind of counteract things that are so in depth, as far as the patriarchy, as far as misogyny, hate towards women, we have to go in deeper. Like, we'll have to really, really go in deeper to try to counteract a lot of these things. Like, for example, can you be independent if you're married? I feel like you can have a certain level of independence if you're married. I just don't feel like it will be, or it can be, as in depth as you would want it to be or as you would need it to be, just because the way society has structured marriage, I don't really believe in the way they've structured marriage. And most people follow the structure in which the patriarchy has given them as far as marriage goes. So really basic level things like, do you guys live together, for example? These type of things, I don't really, how do I say this? I don't think that like living with a male is in the best interest of women. That's it. I just said it. So I don't, even if you're with a male, I just don't see the point of living with that person. Unless, I will say the exception is unless you're pulling together resources. So maybe if we're looking at it from a socioeconomic standpoint, and we have people that are maybe not as wealthy, and then we're kind of going up the ladder to middle class, upper middle class, but I feel like if you're middle class and up, I really don't see the purpose for women. I see why males would want to do it, but I don't see why women do that. I just don't see the point. Like, I don't see why they get into relationships with males and live with the males, because you have, as a woman, way more limited freedom when you do that. So it ends up not really making any sense to me, in my opinion. But I think that when it comes to being independent, it really starts with the mindset. So you really have to have the right mindset. You really have to have the right environment to create the mindset if you're really wanting to dive into how to be more independent. And we're going to start talking, like I said, in this new year, more and more about that, because I know that primarily the channel is based off of bringing more awareness to things like the patriarchy, misogyny. So I really have been thinking a lot more about this and knowing that I have to build this part of the channel as well. like, because with everything with YouTube, you kind of have to build it from scratch, like to bring awareness to people that these are the types of topics that you're talking about, type of thing. And so it's like every little thing you're having to build from scratch, from like zero, you know, zero people listening to like kind of build that up from there. So I feel like this is a good time to start doing that, and start building this part of the channel as well. Now, when it comes to being independent, I feel like a lot of women that think that they're independent are actually not independent. Like, for example, if you're in a relationship, but you're, you know, kind of telling other people to not be in relationships and things like that. Well, I posted in my community section. Hi, Cece, thanks for joining. I got married because my husband retired at age 21. He meals for me and I don't have to lift a finger in this cruel, horrible world. I agree with that last part as far as this world being like insane. Like, it's insane. It is like such a terrible world. And a lot of times I go into thinking, how did we get here? You know, and so that's where we run into things like the patriarchy and all this stuff. And I'm sorry for the lighting. Like, it's dark outside. There's no sun. Let me see. I'm trying to open the window. There's like no sun. There's nothing here. And it's kind of like the rainy vibes. Let me see. Hold on. Yeah, it's kind of like rainy vibes and all that stuff. But anyway, so like I said, I really, yeah, I agree with the last part, like this dark, cruel world. I think, you know, like I said, I like it when women are satisfied with the marriage that they're in, but I just never understood it, because I feel like if you think about it, if you really sit down and think about it before doing it, you start to understand and see that like these are just legal contracts. And so it really starts to, I don't know, it starts to weigh on my mind as far as the fact that, look, the structure doesn't really make any sense at all, right? Mina, we should all be independent. You can rely on men 100. You can't rely on men 100%. Yeah, I agree. Everyone has to be independent, even when you're in a marriage, right? Especially if you're signing that contract to be in a marriage with someone, it becomes even more important for you to be independent. And it becomes even more important for you to know like what that means. Okay, like I feel like there's a lot of women that get into marriages and they kind of stop at surface level, and that's how so many women get in trouble, right? So they'll stop at, like, for example, you know, I'm so happy he does everything for me, and they stop there, you know, like, and that becomes dangerous for a lot of women, not for everyone. I mean, there's some women that it works out just fine for, which is awesome. It's great. We love that. But I think in general, there has to be, you have to have your mind right before getting into a relationship, because what I see a lot of times is that even the women that say that they're happy, it's true, you know, they probably are happy, but what I see a lot of times is that the reason that they're happy is because they've kind of like, how do I say this? They've just kind of accepted not below bare minimum, but like the minimum, right? So they've accepted the minimum and they're okay with just the minimum, right? Which there's nothing wrong with that. It just kind of depends on what you want out of life. But that's what I see a lot of times, is like, not for all, but for a lot of women, they're like, oh, I'm happy and happy. But when you ask them to describe the dynamic of their relationship and what their relationship is actually like, then you start to like see, okay, but you're the one that does most of the dishes, or you're the one that does most of the cleaning, or okay, so you haven't been working this whole time taking care of the kids, and he gets to go out all the time and he just helps every once in a while, and you know, but yet they describe themselves as happy. So I think women are conditioned to kind of accept the minimum and be okay with the minimum. And that is not what independence means. I mean, there's three main things. I would say that the three biggest things that you need to look that like we as women need to always look at in order to see if we are independent or not, because it can be easy to think that you are, but yet you're kind of not. One of the biggest things is financial freedom. I hate to say it, but if you don't have financial freedom as a woman, then you are not independent, you are not free. Okay? Because money is a resource. Okay? And what is that resource? What is it there for? What is its primary use? Well, the primary use of money is to gain independence, which is why, if you think about it in terms of the patriarchy and in terms of males, that is exactly why they started calling women names like spinster. Well, what does a spinster mean? Well, a spinster is a woman that has her own job and has her own money, and she, creates things and sells it for money, and they can't do without her because they need her creations. So they've kind of turned this independent aspect into an insult for women, to have women shy away from being independent. It's a shame. So the biggest thing in this world and this earth, because this is how it's been created, because of the patriarchy, and the sun went down again. So lighting is, I'm not really feeling the lighting, but oh well. The biggest thing in this world that you need in order to be independent is financial freedom. If your finances are like attached to the male in any way, shape, or form, and you don't even have separate bank accounts, you don't have your own money, you're not saving your own money, like you're not independent and you're not free. Okay. You're barely living. And the most dangerous part about that is you don't even know that that's what you're doing. You don't even know that you're barely living life to its fullest potential. And before you know it, you'll be gone. You're here and then you're gone. So financial freedom all throughout the marriage or relationship or dynamic, that is one of the biggest pieces to being independent. If you don't have that, you are not independent. And that is not only, this is important too. And this is why I'm going to start doing way more lives about these types of topics, because when I think about the things or the type of things I actually care about, this is probably where I reside. And so I'm going to have to try to find a way to kind of, connect those dots. But when it comes to like independence, it's not just in relation to relationships. Financial independence, you have to have that regardless of whether or not you're in a relationship with someone. It's better for you to have it before you get into a relationship of any kind. If you're even wanting to do that, it's better for you to be fully financially independent. So what do I mean by that? I mean, you have your own house, you have your own resources, you have stocks, right? Investments. It's better as a woman for you to have all those things first before even thinking about potentially attaching yourself to someone else, right? Because when you don't have those things and then you go and you attach yourself to someone else, it's like you're not going to get the best, like you're probably not going to get the best partner or companion that you could possibly get, just because you yourself were not like at the most elevated level when you attach yourself to this other person, if that makes sense. In my, from what I've seen, because I work within mental health and things like that. So from what I've seen, this is the best and safest route for women, is you have to create yourself first, and then you get more liberty in being choosy. So the less that you've created on your own, the less liberty you get when it comes to choosing. Okay. Like, for example, we had that whole like ISIS incident. Okay. Like, she was kind of looking for this, I guess that I don't know what the official term is, but like a male that's basically going to pay for all her bills and things like that, right? Well, if that's what you're looking for because you don't already have that, then that's going to be your core focus, which is like, let me find a male, let me hurry up and find this male that's going to pay for all my bills, because you don't already have a comfortable situation, or what you perceive to be a comfortable situation. So that's going to be your main focus. You're not going to be able to be as choosy, right? You're not going to be able to say, well, I just, I want him to also have the looks, and I want him to also be 6 foot tall. And I want, you're not really going to be able to be as choosy with these things, because what you need a relationship for, it's coming from a place of lacking. So you're going to really be just focused primarily on this other aspect, right? So I think that's one of the biggest pieces, is financial independence. And then I think the second piece is freedom, which I put separately from financial independence, because you have to find a way to still have your freedom, even if you're going to be partnered with someone. And I think that, for example, traveling across the world, I have for 2025 so far, I have 3 trips. My first one, I'm going to Costa Rica, and then I'm going to be in Japan, and then I'm going to Thailand. So I have 3 trips planned so far. I don't like traveling during the summer because there's too many people, too many kids, too much going on. And I don't like being around a lot of people. So, being able to comfortably live as a single person, even if you're in a relationship, I think is really important. Because the two kind of have to blend together. So if you weren't able to do that before getting into some type of partnership or relationship, and then you get into the partnership, you're limiting your existence and you don't even know it, right? I will never live with a man. Oh my God, AW. We might be connected souls, because that's my biggest thing. I don't see the point of living with a male. I'm so sorry. But if you don't already have your own things, and you don't already have your own home and your own, you're going to end up living with a male because you don't already have your own things. But I would never, ever live with a male. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. So it just doesn't make sense to me for women, and I think women won't really understand that until you get your own place and you work on this independence piece. And then you'll understand why we say that, why we say or you've lived with a male, it didn't go well, and now you kind of had to learn the hard way. Right. So I would never live with a male. It just literally does not make sense. It's not even a requirement to be with one of them. It's society and the patriarchy that has forced that on you because it's better for the male. But it sucks for you, because no matter what you do, you're always going to pay. You're always going to be the one paying more for that. You're always going to be the one sacrificing more for that. It literally sucks for you as a woman big time. So I would never, ever live with a male, just because it doesn't make sense for women to do that. In my opinion, it literally does not make any sense. Imagine, oh my God, y'all, you get home, the stuff is not, it's not clean, it's not done the way that you want it to. You can't put colors that you might want. You have to compromise on everything. And then at the end of the day, you're barely getting the below bare minimum from the male himself. Girl, what? I can't do it. I'm so sorry. It's so unnecessary. It's why? Even to raise kids, it's not even the best environment. It's the way I think about it. AW just got me on a rant about that. The way I think about it, it's you're trapping yourself in a box with a literal predator. No matter how much you like your predator, that's what they are. They're hunters by nature. And you have decidedly trapped yourself literally in a box with this person. It doesn't even make any sense. And most males don't even like it. So they might rebel against it and take it out on you. That's where you start seeing ACCROSS and all these things happening when you're all cooped up in the same environment, in the same box. You know what I'm saying? Like, it makes no sense to me. I just don't like working. I want to use my time the way I want to. I hear that a lot. Cece says I just don't like working. I hear that a lot, but at the end of the day, Cece, I mean, how do I say this? Like, I just don't feel like, I feel like people are too focused on only trying to do what they like doing, to the point where they don't understand that there's a balance that needs to happen. If you want to transcend a certain level, sometimes you're going to have to like grind it out and do what you don't like to do in order to elevate yourself beyond where society wants you to be, which is just here, right? Flatlined. There's a lot of people that might not like working in particular, but they have to find a way to maybe start a business. That's my thing. That's what I did. It took a while. It takes a while. It's a sacrifice that you have to make. But that sets you up literally for the rest of your life. So to me, it doesn't make any sense to not make the sacrifice. Even if it takes 5 years or 10 years, it literally doesn't make any sense to not make the sacrifice, because then you're good for the rest of your life. Like, literally the rest of your life, you're good. Like, if you start a business and you focus on that business for 5 years, 10 years, and now that business is functional, mostly without you even having to be involved, now you don't have to worry about working. Now you don't have to worry about having a male provide these things for you. Now you don't have to worry about not traveling and having a budget that's not even based off of your budget. It's based off of the male's budget. You don't have to worry about all these mundane things, right? So it's kind of like people having kids and then not wanting to sacrifice like dating when they know that they have kids. Like, if they're single, not wanting to sacrifice like dating when they know that they have kids, and it's more dangerous for the kids if they go out there and start dating, right? Now, I get it. Like, society makes it very, very difficult, and it doesn't encourage women being independent. And it's insane, because that's the path to liberty. That's literally the path to freedom. There's no other way to get there, but they won't tell you that. So you end up, and you have limited life. Like, you're only here a limited amount of time. So if you figure it out too late, you're screwed, basically, right? So it's insane to me, but the thing is, like, even if you have a kid and you're not in a relationship, I feel like women don't understand the reason they keep dating, even though it's not in the best interest of her, it's not in her best interest, and it's not in the best interest of the child, is because they don't understand that the level of happiness, there's a different level of happiness that's above all of those levels that are lower tier happiness. And she's not able to get there because of all of this like societal conditioning and stuff like that. Like, I remember with the ISIS thing, I was arguing tooth and nail in this comment section about something that I feel like is so basic. Like, if you have young kids, if you have kids in general, don't date as a woman, because it's too dangerous. It's too dangerous for you, and it's too dangerous for the children. Like, males are literally hunters. They're by nature, biologically speaking, that's what they are. Predators, hunters. That's it. That's what they do. So they can seem as nice as daylight. They can be as nice as daylight, but that is their biological makeup. Okay. So it didn't make sense to me to take such a big risk when that's not in your best interest as a woman. It's not in the interest of your child. So all these women were like saying, oh my God, I can date. I can this and that and that. I can this and that and that. And it wasn't computing to me, because I was like, I don't get it. Because if you are at the right level where you're supposed to be, you're happier doing your own thing. You're happier not having to go on all these dates, and you're just happier, like, because it's a different level of freedom. So I didn't understand what the whole fuss or fight was about, and so I started thinking about it more, and I was like, ugh, this is a mess. Like they've ruined the biological conditioning of women. Like, so the patriarchy and males, they've interfered with that, because it's males that are codependent by nature, because males cannot give birth, they can't get pregnant, they can't bring life. So they have a biological need and a biological reason to be codependent to women. Okay. Women don't have that. You don't have that, right? So you don't have a biological need to be codependent, wanting to date, wanting to do all these things with males. There's literally no need there except for the conditioning, except for the psychological need. And so they have, and that's why you see the world, and the world is what it is today. It's because they've interfered too much with nature. But the problem when you interfere with nature is you can't win. So what ends up happening is you slowly start to see these things happening, like, okay, are human beings going extinct? The birth rate is reducing. More and more women are like, the guys are getting more violent because it's not in their nature to begin with to want to be trapped in that way. So you start to see all of these repercussions from the consistent attempt to fight biology, nature, psychology, and it's counter nature. Right. And so wanting companionship is one thing, but I feel like a lot of women don't even know that they're operating based off of their conditioning. And they don't even realize that that's what's happening. And it's so hard to decondition yourself from operating from a place of lack. Right. So when it comes to that issue of, when you have a kid, the priority is supposed to be the kid, and you're supposed to be the priority, then the kid comes after, but you can't seem to get it together long enough to not date. It's so inconsequential to you having a male around that I don't get. It's like insane, because it's not in your best interest whatsoever. But that conditioning is so strong that I had women fighting this thought process in the comments section, telling me like, they can date, we can date, we can Meanwhile, I've watched, if you knew how many documentaries I've watched of what these males were doing to women, like years ago. Like, women were literally, like, they would tie them up, they would beat them up, they would, like, I've seen it, because that's what I don't know, that's what I'm interested in when it comes to history. And I'm thinking to myself, this is what you're fighting for? It's mind-boggling, right? Like, even anime, like, there's some animes that I like the action ones, and then sometimes I'll stumble upon anime that I know, like, oh, that was definitely anime that was made by a male, because the level of violence against women and children in those animes, you already know that's a male made that anime for sure. It's not like, there was one that I had to click out of, because sometimes, like, you'll click different ones trying to find something to watch, because I don't know, for some reason I haven't been into movies and K-dramas. I haven't really been into, I feel like it's a double-edged sword, because the more you learn about it, the less, like, entertaining it becomes. Like K-dramas, for example, it just becomes way less entertaining, because it's like, I don't know, what they're trying to do, and it's like, okay, well, this is not going to work for me. I don't know, it's weird. So I clicked through, and now I've been having to, like, skip even more animes, because it's like, okay, what's this? There was one that I clicked on, and I was like on the first episode, and they were tying women up, beating them up, but those things are like, they base it off of like how they view women, right? So when it's a male doing that, when it's a male writing that, because this is what this is what they're thinking about. This is where their imagination takes them, especially based on historical conditioning. And I was like, okay, I don't, I get psychologically disturbed. I can't watch that. I mean, show me, like a friendship amongst women, because I don't know, I get disturbed. Friendships amongst males is just weird to me. It's like, because I know that they can't really be real friends. They're just kind of like predators. So I don't know, women fighting for their life to keep dating their own predators, their own unalivers, didn't make any sense to me. I couldn't believe that like women were doing that. I was like, what are you talking about? Like, this male is so inconsequential. You're literally, biologically speaking, you're not even supposed to be living with one of them, because that's how dangerous they are, right? Like, they're physically stronger than you for a reason, you know? So think about that. Like, they're physically stronger than you, and here you are willingly seeking them out, can't even give them up, not even if it's for your own kid. Like, it's a conditioning, and it's kind of messed everything up, right? It's like a big rat in the house. Oh my God. You know, when I posted in my community section, I posted that I was going live. And then someone, like a lady, left a comment on there and said, oh, wow, he's hot. Because I used like a picture of a demon guy, a guy that's a demon. And she was like, oh, he's so hot. And I'm like, that's just, what do you mean he's so hot? Like, she didn't even, you know, I don't blame her, because, you know, we don't want ugly males, but still, that was so funny. My ex used to trap me in our apartment. Yeah, exactly, Mina. I mean, that's what you sign up for when you're interacting with these males and you're not self-sufficient and you're not independent and you're not where you need to be. You know, you end up getting like one of the leftover males. There's no other way around that. You know, there's a reason why the women that are richer, that have more resources, they have more of an ability to choose. And yet, what I find a lot of times is even those women are kind of like, at least the ones on social media, are brainless. So they choose just any male just to conform to societal standards. And the next thing we know, they're getting a divorce, or the male is caught doing some underrated, shady activity. Now her name is involved with that, you know? So it's like, you know, you have to have both the mentality and your own resources. Like, they go hand in hand. You have to be independent mentally and have your own resources in order to really be able to assess the situation that you're getting yourself into, because it's not a game. I feel like women go in there and they want this fantasy that's not real life. Like, it's not a game. He will unalive you, like, literally. He has no control over his emotions. He doesn't, like, you keep talking about, let's talk about it. Like, why didn't you just tell me about it? Like, look, listen, lady, they don't like talking. They don't like all that stuff, right? So most of them, 95% of them, that's a lot. So for you to think that you're going to be on the other 5%, well, I don't know what to tell you. But like, it's, you know, I feel like women approach it like it's kind of like a game. And that's how most women get hurt, right? There was, I don't know if y'all have seen it. You might have, because it had so many views on it. There was a video that came out recently, and it was talking about a woman that got unalived by her husband, and they had just gotten married. Literally, they were on their honeymoon, and he beat her to a pulp, like, to the point where they weren't able to recognize her face. They couldn't even like bury her. They had to cremate her because there was nothing they could do to kind of like restore what she looked like. And it was insane, right? So that's the thing. I don't know. It never made any sense to me. And I always feel, and what I found consistently is that women that say that they're happy married, it's because they've given up, like they've settled at a lower vibrational frequency. They've kind of settled there. They have settled at this lower standard, and they're okay with doing most of the work and existing to exist, right? Now, is there anything wrong with that? Not particularly. I mean, if as long as he's not like, unfortunately, the standard for males is like the below bare minimum. So as long as he's not like putting hands on you, you know, and psychologically, but the psychological part is harder to catch. So you might not know that that's happening. And so, but as long as he's not assuming you, I guess that's one thing, right? So, but that's what I found, because as a woman, you will always be the one doing most of the work. So you'll always, that's always going to be the dynamic. So even the ones that there's even the ones that are on YouTube that will promote things like 4B. I put this in my community section. Married women that promote Married Girls channel. May as well call it the Married Girls. Yes, but if more women come to this channel supporting marriage, then what is the point? May as well call it Married Girls. Yeah. I mean, I tell women, I try to be inclusive, but I tell women all the time that marriage, when you sit back and think about it, that is not a contract that's in your best interest necessarily. I guess I could see if you get yourself in a very difficult situation where you have kids and like you don't have any money and you don't have enough money or enough resources. So that way, but I just can't support the marriage thing on a mass scale because it's not really useful. It ends up being more detrimental than it is useful, because most women that I see, they might get, when they get divorced and they have kids, they might get maybe $500, $600 child support. And most of those males are running away from even paying that. They're like, the child support is backdated. You gave up most of your life and life force. Now you've brought in genetics from this male. Like you've literally brought in you've duplicated his genetics, right? It's a mess. It's a catastrophe. So I don't think that the marriage thing is in a woman's best interest. Even me, like as someone that has my own resources, I doubled like the marriage thing is just so dumb to me. Like, why would I get into such a contract with you, knowing that most of the time that same contract doesn't even protect the people that it's supposed to protect, which is women? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't make sense, especially when there's other separate contracts, individual contracts that you could both agree to sign, like a affidavit or something like that. Like, say you end up in the hospital and you want him to make the decision for you. There's a separate contract that you can sign for that without kind of trapping yourself. And there's separate contracts that you can sign that would be stronger than a marriage contract, because they're individually made contracts to specific situations and agreements. So to me, I'm like, I don't understand why people just do that, especially women, like especially with what we know about males. Like, so many of them say the truth, right? Like, they don't like marriage, they don't like being trapped, they don't like being in like one place, they don't like, you know what I'm saying? So it doesn't make any sense to me. Now, do I want to be inclusive? I do. Like, if you're married and you're satisfied with that situation, then that's okay. But I just feel like that's what I think. I don't think it makes sense. And I think that if you've done that as a woman, now you're even more trapped, because it's a mental thing. Like, we even use it in psychology, like with addicts, right? For example, we'll have them literally write a contract and we'll have them sign it because it's mental, right? It makes it more plausible that they will stick to whatever's in that contract. So when you're doing a lot of things when you do that, to where, to me, it's kind of like that marriage thing is outdated. It doesn't make any sense to me. Even back in the day, if you read books and stuff, you learn that there was a time period where people stopped going based off of this marriage thing and they started making their own contract. It got so bad, people started making their own contracts and they would just sign their own contracts, right? So when you really look into it, it doesn't really make sense. Like, because if you choose to have for example, as a woman, you choose to have a child by a male, then you're supposed to be choosing so correctly. You're supposed to be so correct in the way that you're choosing that even without living with you, right? Like this male is paying for everything, especially everything related to the children, right? But not just the children, but you too, because you are required to bring those children here. So there's so many males that will say, well, she spends it on herself. It's insane to me. Like they don't want to pay for the vessel that brings the children here. And you just procreated with that same male. Make it make sense. So the marriage part is so inconsequential because you have to make sure that despite those things, like he's going to do that. And if he's not the type of person that would do that, then that's probably not someone that you want in your vicinity, and you want to be duplicating his genes. You don't want to duplicate those genes. Okay. You don't want to bring those genes here. So yeah, I agree. I don't get it. And the married women that come on and support 4B, I appreciate for supporting 4B, but I can't ignore the dissonance in telling other women to not do this or not do that, but yet you're married. There's a dissonance there. There's a dissonance. But I mean, they're trying to be supportive of the movement, and I think if you can learn something from it, that's fine. But I don't know. I just kind of feel like there's a disconnect between your message and the authenticity of your life, right? There's kind of a little bit of a disconnect. Is it like a huge deal where I'm like very, no. I mean, to me, as long as there's something to be learned from the message, it's fine, but there is a disconnect there. Yeah, femicide in Africa is getting really bad. There's a lot of countries I need to touch base on. I just created another podcast on Korea, following up on Korea, and that didn't perform as well as I would expect it to. So I'm trying to figure out, because it seems to me like sometimes the algorithm changes, and then we, as like the content creators, like depending on the niche, we kind of have to like relearn the algorithm or figure out what's going on there. But yeah, I'm still gonna have to do Africa. I'm still gonna have to do Iceland. Iceland is so interesting, y'all. I'm still gonna have to do, I want to do Germany so bad. But some of these countries, they don't have, I know people are mostly entertained by the TikToks and the shorts, and some of these countries they operate similar to North Korea. Okay. It's like there's not that much out there for them, but it could still be done in an entertaining way. It just takes me more time to create the podcast when that's the case. So yeah, I know there's a lot of countries that we still need to touch base on and do. And at the same time, I'm still kind of like figuring out the algorithm, the niche in and of itself, like all of these other admin stuff. So yeah, I'm looking forward to doing that. Africa, I'll say this about Africa. It's a very like interesting culture, because Africa is where you will find the most pygmishas ever. Okay, like if you want to find pygmishas, go to Africa. And if you guys are watching this afterwards, don't come for me, because look, I'm African too. I'm like mixed, and I have African in there. So I'm gonna say what I want, but I know like you'll find so many pygmishas. The difference is the African women are very, very like, they operate a lot closer to like how males operate. So it's kind of different from like what you might find somewhere else, where the women are very like passive and all these things, like, so it's an interesting dynamic there in Africa, but completely correct in that it's the ACCROSS of women and children in Africa is astronomical. And then that combined to Africa, where, a good question. I think Africa as a whole has this problem, but I think definitely you find it in some of the biggest areas, like for example, Nigeria, right? They have a lot of issues there but I'm not going to dive into Nigeria. Yeah. I'm not going to dive into like the economics too deeply, but there's so much separation within Africa where it's like you have all these different languages all within 5 miles. Like you have different tribes, and there's a lot of things that are keeping segregation well and alive in Africa on a different level, right, than any other country that we might look at. And then on top of that, misogyny runs deep in like it's at the core, the fabric of the entire country, Nigeria, for example. And that's with it, and it's within women and males. So that is why when we look at it economically, I try not to make these too like scientific because I want it to be also entertaining. But I don't know, somehow I always end up having to try to explain it in this way. But like when we look at it economically, Africa is really supposed to be leading in the world in a lot of different areas, because you find a lot of oil in Africa, you find a lot of gold, a lot of natural resources, and it's been so many years and they just can't do it. They can't seem to take the lead. And the core reason why are societal issues. It's societal, it's the reasons are based off of the way that their society is constructed, right? And it literally is it's their downfall every time, right? So that's a really interesting one that I'll have to make. There's so many. I end up picking, I end up picking based off of like the bigger countries that I see come up more often, like Korea, K-drama, all this stuff. Like that's what I use. So that's kind of how I go about it. But it's not because of anything else, because I've spoken up about Africa and other countries as well. It's just because there's countries that come up more like in the news and that are well known, that I feel like because they're so well known, it's important to push back like in the moment, because more people are seeing, like for example, K-dramas. So many people will see that, so many women will see that and think that that's how Korean males are, and it's not, so things like that. That's kind of how I go about choosing. But there's a lot of countries that will be coming soon, because even in Iceland, SMS over there in Iceland, I did one about Argentina recently, and that's a mess too. Imagine in Argentina, the women fought for those rights, they gained the rights, and now they've taken the rights away. So you could fight for all these rights as women and still have those rights taken away from you. It makes no sense, because it's a patriarchy. But we've never ever seen that happen to males. We've never ever seen that males had a right, then that same right was taken away. We've never seen that. It's always against women. Why? Because you're the value. The women are the value. So if you're going to control something, if you're going to fight to control something, you're not going to fight to control something that's useless, like a male. You know what I mean? Like you're going to try to get the vessel. You're going to try to control the what actually literally serves a purpose biologically, right? So that's why circling back around to the independence piece, the biggest fight that you can do against the patriarchy and against all of the misogyny and societal conditioning is being independent as a woman, period. And knowing what that means also, because in order to be independent, I feel like a lot of women don't really understand what that means. Like, for example, there's like a lot of married women that seem to feel like they're still independent, yet when you ask them more questions, it's like, they're not able to just pick up and travel whenever they want to, for example, right? They don't have their own resources, they don't have their own assets, they don't have their own, anything. Everything is combined like this, right? So that's not independence. That's you being trapped and you haven't settled for being trapped, right? So as women, we have to be careful about that. So even if you're going to do that, you want to make sure that you set it up correctly. Let me see. There's some comments here that I'm behind on. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Married Girls channel. Yeah. Yeah, choosing correctly is such risky business. It's like a game of chance. Yeah. And I feel like what women really fail to understand also is that, like, there is really, it's not, when it comes down to it, you can reduce your chances. You don't even have to play that game. Like, the game in and of itself is optional. They just don't tell you that. So you end up feeling forced psychologically and mentally to participate in a game that's not even in your best interest. You could literally say, no, I don't want to play. And you can make up your own game. You could literally make up your own game and be like, I'm going to play this game instead. Okay. So the whole choosing correctly thing, I don't even really like, I feel like if you follow certain like values and like beliefs, I guess, for example, never live with a male. If you never live with one of them, then the risk, from a risk assessment perspective, the risk that you're taking if it turns out that this male is like a nut job is significantly less. You can literally just be like, oops, never mind, goodbye, because you're not cooped up in the same box as this guy, right? So it's a completely different game that you're playing. You're not playing the standard societal game anymore. You're playing at this level because it's totally different. And you're not having to, as a woman, assume all the risk that they want you to assume. They want you to be the one taking all the risks so they can YOLO it out. They want to YOLO it out and have the best time while they're alive, while you get stuck holding the bag of not gold. When I say holding the bag, I'm not talking about like money. It's so that's what they want you to do. And if you're not able to think your way out of that, you're going to be in trouble because you're going to fall right into one of the games that they have set up for you. Meanwhile, you're not supposed to be falling into these games. You're really supposed to be choosing the ones that you want to play and then inventing and creating your own. That's it. That's what it comes down to, right? So 4B in Korea, 4B is residual in Korea, and most women who partake in it suffer from androphobia due to DV and violence in dating. Yeah, most women that partake in 4B in Korea don't say or admit that they do because of all these things that they have to deal with in response to that. And I have the way I feel about, because there's a lot of women here too that I see that say things like, let's move in silence. Let's move in silence. But I feel like moving in silence makes it worse for women. Moving in silence is how we got to where we are today, where there's more women than ever being unalived. There's more women. I feel like moving in silence is like, to me, it's the equivalent of being selfish, right? But in Korea, it's more than just moving in silence. They're not doing it like in America, like we do it. Let's move in silence just cause. They're not doing it because of that. They're doing it because there's a legitimate threat to their lives, if they vocalize that this is what they're doing, which doesn't make sense because 4B is basically you choosing what you want to do with your own life. It literally, you're not hurting anyone. You're not harming anyone. It's just you choosing, no, I don't want to do that. I'm not in a place for that. I'm good. Like, I don't want, it's literally you just choose. It's freedom. It's a certain level of freedom and autonomy. Right. But the society doesn't support that. The society doesn't allow that. So from a survival standpoint, a lot of women there end up having to just do what they're going to do without vocalizing it. And as a result, they lose a lot from not being able to do that, because the patriarchy does that for a reason. Because if you start talking to each other, the strength comes in numbers. Okay. Where this woman now realizes, wait, you're going through the same thing. So it's not me, it's them, right? Now this woman, so then you're building up to a very big problem for the patriarchy in society itself. Well, in Korea, the women aren't really able to do that because there's a real threat to their literal biological existence and lives. So they have to move in the way that they're moving. Versus here, you'll see women say move in silence. And it's like, what? Like, no, we're not doing that, because moving in silence, when you are already when we're already where we are today, because we didn't move in silence, that's how we got here in the first place. So the whole thing is so dumb to me. Like, it's like the whole reason we got to where we are today, where Korea isn't there societally yet, is because we didn't move in silence. Like, literally, when you hear males speak, one of the males' biggest fears is a feminist. I kid you not. Like, they fear feminists. Like, it's like they really despise feminists, and they fear feminists because they know that feminists are usually not quiet. They're going to start talking, they're going to start making noise, they're going to start saying, what are we doing here? Hey, what are you doing over there? And they hate that, because that's how you amass change. That's how change comes about. That's how we got to where we are today. It's not by being silent against literal predators that will unalive you at any moment. Those two things don't go together, so in freer countries, when it comes to society, to me, that concept doesn't make any sense. Like, let's just move. It's kind of like when women say my man when they have a boyfriend or something. You'll hear them describe that boyfriend as my man, and I've never understood that. Like, what? Like, so they talk just like males speak. They describe males like property, right? What do you mean my? And the thing is that that aggravates males even more, because males, they end up resenting you real fast, for things like that, because they don't really want to be owned. They want to YOLO. They want to YOLO. They don't want to be owned. They don't want to feel like now they're having to do things because you're forcing them to do it. And to a certain extent, that's understandable, because women wouldn't want to feel that way either. So I don't really understand women that go around saying, my man, my man. I'm like, this is like a whole nother human being. It's like the way you talk about children doesn't make sense to me. So that's an important point too. Since we support women here, you can give some advice for the ladies who want boyfriend or husband if they ask. Yeah. That's kind of what we're talking about now. I think that I think women can give the advice all day long, but I don't know. I feel like most women aren't going to follow it, because I do feel like most women are kind of like, I hate to say it, but weak. They're weak. They're mentally weak. And if there's one area where you need to be strong as a woman, it's here, because the males are physically stronger than you. So if there's one area where you need to be stronger, it's here. It's here, and psychologically. And I just feel like women are just mentally weak. So you can say all day long, like, what should happen. But they just don't, I don't know. They're just not gonna be able, a lot of women aren't going to be able to get there, because they're not able to evolve like they're supposed to, because there's been too much interference from like the patriarchy, from society. There's just it's like trying to dial into the right radio station, but every radio station you keep hearing static, right? That's kind of what it's like. So the independence piece, I think, is the biggest piece. Now, I say things like that are really out of the norm. I say, why are you signing a marriage contract? That's dumb. But then you'll have women go in and do it anyway, and they'll sign the marriage contract, and now they're trapped there. Now they want to like get out, and it's harder for them to get out of this marriage contract. It's a mess, So there's ways of doing it. I think the question is whether or not women are capable of listening. Yeah, he's lying to us for sure. I've always been independent. My dad told me if I depend on a male, I'd be homeless. Yeah, you would. If you depend on a male, you not only, you'll either be homeless or you'll have to sacrifice what I consider to be too much of a sacrifice and too unnecessary of a sacrifice, right? You have to kind of play this game and this dynamic every single day, right? Like when he wakes up, you'll have to kind of play this game. If he annoys you, you kind of have to play this other game, and you have to do that day in, day out, which you can get used to, I guess, but it's a matter of how do you want to spend your time? How do you want to spend your life, right? So the first thing is financial independence. And because it's hard, you'll see a lot of women say, no, that's too hard. I don't want to work. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. So it's kind of like, well, I mean, if you get yourself in the situation, then what? But financial independence means that you are, for the most part, set, right? So you have your own money, your own businesses, you have your own assets, which means houses, right? Or at least one house that's yours and yours alone. You have your own bank accounts, your own vehicle, like all of these things that are surface level that have to be there. You already have them. I think that's the first step to positioning yourself to being really choosy and not ending up with some weirdo. And now you're stuck there with this weirdo, right? And it also creates an emotional barrier. I promise. It creates an emotional barrier because now you have more to protect. Okay. So you're not going to be willy-nilly just attaching yourself to anything and everything, mentally and emotionally, because you have more to protect. You have more there that you've worked really, really hard for. So therefore, you're not willing to sacrifice because of all the work that you've put in. But, you have a lot of women that are just not willing to do that work, right? Yeah, an awakened woman is a dangerous woman. Exactly. And they do not want, when I tell you they don't want that by any means necessary, that's why the word independent triggers males so much. Whenever I'm choosy with where I respond via the channel because of the name. The name of the channel triggers males a lot. Like they just get triggered by it. And if you sit back and think about it, you start wondering, why are you so triggered? What sense does it make for you to be triggered by a woman's independence? That doesn't make any sense, right? So they get really, really triggered by you if you are independent. They get really, really triggered by you if you are self-sufficient. Okay, because you have to think about it from a hunter's perspective, right? Like if you're hunting, you want one that's going to be there and she's going to be stuck to you and she can't do anything about it. That's what you're looking for. And once you get that one, then you can go out and do more of whatever you want to do, right? So that's why so many women get cheated on, because what they're looking for at the beginning to start off with is one that's just going to like play the role and do all of these things that you yourself don't want to do. Okay. And where it gets dangerous for a lot of women is, well, you don't want them cheating on you, right? So a lot of women go outside of the lines that the males want them being in, and they start complaining about cheating, this and that, like he cheated, this and that. And then the males get really violent, resentful, all these other things. So you're playing with, you're just playing within territory that's not worth it for you. My man is like a joke now, girl. It's so insane when I hear women say, my man, I cringe. It's disgusting because it's like, okay, because you sound like a man. Because, like, why are you treating this male like his property? And also, why are you treating this male like it's an accomplishment? He's just the male, man. There's like a million of them out there. Like, what is the problem? It doesn't even make any sense. So it's like women that haven't really accomplished anything, that's how they speak. These are the same women that you'll find that say things like, no, he only pays for me. He's not going to pay. Why should he pay for my friends? Why should he pay for the table? It's the same type of women. They're poor. They have like a poverty mindset. Yes, that's a real thing, because being poor, you get stuck in the mindset of it. So you have a male here and you're not even putting him to work. So what is his purpose? Like, you only want him paying for you. Why? Is he your property? Like, I don't understand. Like, those women to me sound like males. I'm so sorry, but they sound like males, like through and through, because what are you even talking about? Like, it's like they don't have any other accomplishments and they feel like having a male is an accomplishment. I'm like, well, obviously you haven't watched the documentaries I've watched with what these males have been doing and have done. Why do you think women didn't even have bank accounts until like the 1970s? We couldn't even have bank accounts. How do you think they were accomplishing that? And this is what you're claiming. It makes no sense, right? So let's see. Yeah, most women want that fantasy and it's totally insane. It's like, wake up. I think the problem is that most women want the fantasy, but they don't want to work for it. And they don't realize that the fantasy actually is not really even a fantasy, right? Like, so they want this K-drama type of connection. And it's like, look, the males that you've brought here, they don't stand a chance being anything close to what you are seeing in these K-dramas. The reason you're seeing this dynamic in these K-dramas, in fact, is because a lot of K-dramas, guess what, are written by women. Like that, literally. So it makes, like, a lot of K-dramas are written by women, produced and everything. And then the males come in and they put in whatever their like misogyny is, or the women put it in there because the misogyny might be ingrained in there. But we know that patriarchy sends a lot of the messaging of how they want you to behave based off of the shows and the music and all of these things that you listen to. So, it's like you want something that's totally ridiculous, that's not even going to bring you the happiness that you want. Like, you want to live a K-drama life, and the K-drama life in and of itself would probably suck if you sit back and think about, even if that were possible. Like, you'd be bored to death, girl. Like, you're going to be playing all these games. You're going to have to like see all these, you don't have any freedom. You can't do what you want to do. You're going to have to be playing all these games that center around a male. It doesn't make any sense. So they want this fantasy. And when they get to the real world, then they start complaining because the real world isn't anything like the fantasy that they thought that it was going to be. What advice do you have for a woman who works in a male-dominated environment? My number one advice to women that work in a male-dominated environment is to, it depends. It's to kind of start thinking like a male, if that makes sense. Like, I was trying to be careful, because I know when you say stuff, if you're not really kind of like as careful as you can, the women might try to implement that incorrectly in the real world. And that's not what I'm wanting to do. So the number one advice I would give you, if you are in a male-dominated environment, from a psychological perspective, because my field is primarily psychology. My businesses and stuff, that's what it revolves around. And then I have other businesses as well that I've been able to get into because that's where I started, was within my field, is to start thinking like a male. That's my number one advice, is to start thinking like a male. Like, I have 3 brothers, so I can't tell you, when I was a little bit younger, we would get into these discussions and arguments. And back then I didn't understand why we didn't see eye to eye on all of these things. But the one thing that I would always be able to do is, as soon as I start thinking like them, I can then like tailor my answers, especially if they start making me feel like uncomfortable, or uncomfortable in the sense of annoyed, because I get annoyed, like with how ridiculous I think they're sounding. All I have to do is like kind of switch the game on them, right? So I end up thinking like them. So therefore, I start sounding like them, even though the message that I'm saying, like what I'm saying, could be, I could literally be supporting women in what I'm saying. I could literally be saying, like, males suck. They suck. Don't be around any males. Don't live with them. I could literally be communicating that same message, but in the same way that a male comes off or speaks, and they'll accept it. It's so weird. Like, it's so weird. So you can literally communicate the message that you want to communicate, right? And if you're in a male dominated field, as long as you're like, and you've mastered how males think and how they behave and how they speak, if you can communicate it in that same way, yeah, you're good. Even the ones that come after you, like, because they'll always try to be weird, condescending. They'll always try to insult you, especially if you're the only woman there. They'll do all these things, right? The way you always respond to that, you respond to it by giving the message, the woman's message, which is your message. You give your message, but you wrap it up, right, in a way, in the same language that males speak. So you essentially have to learn how to speak their language. And the way that you do that is just by studying them and studying their behavior. That would be my biggest recommendation for that. Yeah, males are inherently aggressive and violent. It's crazy how society convinced women that it's okay to live with males, and it's so insane. Like, I don't get it. We've been talking about that this whole live. I can't understand, like, I guess I can understand if you're younger, because that's why they try to catch you so young, because it does take time and experience to learn these things, because the patriarchy is trying to catch you while you're young. They're trying to catch you before the age of 26, 27. Because they know by the time you get to that age, now you have more experience. Now you've kind of seen, you've looked around, and now you see the disconnect between what they're saying and the real world. So it becomes harder, to keep you from evolving. But it doesn't, even if you study history, if you study the history of marriages and you study the history of relationship dynamics, we haven't been doing this whole living together with the male for very long from a historical perspective. Throughout history, before this became a thing, women didn't live with males. That wasn't like that. That's not how that was constructed. That's not how that was working. But the patriarchy needed to make these males a little bit more useful. So they want every male to have a woman, and they promise the males that their prize is to have this woman, not in a positive way, but in a way where, like, you as the woman are the object, like literally an object. You're not really seen as a human being, right? So the prize is that you get this shiny object. that's going to cook and clean and bring your DNA and replicate that into the world and even take care of your own DNA, and you won't have to lift a finger if you're productive and you go to work and you add to the patriarchy. So that's where that's where this whole thing comes from, with the one-to-one dynamic. Let's put the prey in the same living environment, the same living space as the predator. So you'll notice a lot of women have to, it shouldn't be, and it's normal to them, but they have to expand considerable energy to explain basic emotional things, basic emotional thoughts to males that they live with. They literally have to sit there and explain the most basic emotional things. Why don't you understand me? It's a matter of empathizing. Well, when you empathize, you put yourself, the most basic things to males, because they don't have that by nature. And these are the same women that will say, I'm so happy in my marriage. Meanwhile, they're expanding all of this emotional resource, right, in order to make that environment livable or tolerable. So they've done a really, really good job of convincing women to live with their own predators, even though it's so unnecessary. Matter of fact, you probably would get more loyalty from a male if you don't live with them, if you just let them do what they want and they're just choosing that loyalty piece. You're probably more likely to get it, so that's the problem with that. Through all of these Disney movies, the Disney shows, and then, the women and people keep feeding this information to their children. So these children are watching these Disney movies. They're watching these Disney shows, which The Little Mermaid, that's a really popular one. The Little Mermaid, literally, she's like a fish in the water or whatever. And then she gives up her whole family. She gives up everything just to be with a male. When you sit back as an adult and process through that, you say, that doesn't make any sense. Why would she give up everything that she loves just to be with a male? Now, look what happens. What happens is women, grow up watching that stuff, and you'll see them, next thing you know, they're traveling to Africa, they're traveling to Germany, they're traveling to Russia just because they want to be with a male. Meanwhile, it's like, ma'am, there's other males here where you don't have to travel. Where you don't have to travel to, but it's encoded in the messaging. And so, if you think of human beings like animals, because human beings are kind of like animals in a way, you can really encode certain messagings in them. Yeah. And it's really, really hard for that to be decoded, for them to decode. They really have to reach a certain level of conscious processing in order to decode from that construction if you start it early. So that's why you see a lot of this messaging, it starts with children's shows. I mean, I watch Cartoon Network. And if I watch Cartoon Network and I'm watching that and I'm laughing and stuff, then that's not meant for kids. So why they market Cartoon Network as a kid channel, beyond me. I don't get it. Because in Cartoon Network, those cartoons are doing all type of stuff, making all type of inappropriate jokes, and this is what the kids are sitting down watching. So the truth is, they target your kids. That's how we end up with what we have today. They target the kids. And so it's so much easier to infuse that thought process all throughout their growing up and get them to align with what you want them to do. If you target the kids, that's how they do it. Target the next generation, right? So that's how they do it. Yeah. Yeah. Relationships with trauma bonds, those are interesting. Relationship with trauma bonds, it's think of relationship with trauma bonds as an addiction, because that's what it is. You get addicted to the chemicals that are released whenever that trauma is triggered. So you've basically trained your body to get addicted to certain chemicals that are released whenever the trauma itself is triggered. So you have a really big problem in the sense of, well, now you're not just fighting to become a better person, you're literally having to fight a whole like addiction that has been created within your body, and you're having to decode on a much deeper level. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Who wants to be with a German or a Russian male? No disrespect to them, but they are as cold and unemotional. Well, Russian males, German males, I don't know. I feel like it's a toss-up, because which one's worse? The ones that are like openly cold and unemotional towards you, or the ones that are like cold and emotional but will sit there and lie to you? So you got to think about these things. I don't know which one's worse. I don't know what y'all think. I feel like I'd much rather deal with the one that's straight up upfront, dishonest, and just does it openly. Because what ends up happening is these males, they don't change. They're not changing for you, right? They just lie. They just get better at lying. They get better at like reflecting back to you what it is that you're saying that you want to see, so that then they can go on the back end and do whatever it is that they actually want to do. So then it becomes kind of like, okay, well, they end up, in my mind, they end up all in the same bucket of like, okay, well, you're still getting the same thing. You're just choosing between wrapping papers. You know what I'm saying? It's like literally complete insanity. So when it comes to like mating on a biological level, when it comes to mating on a biological level, that's why I say like, it's one thing to want like a companion, but it's another to literally like sit there living with your predator, doing all these things for predators. Like that part to me just doesn't make any sense. Mm-hmm. They can't thrive alone. That's why it gives sus when I meet a man over 40 who's never been married or has no kids. That's not by choice. Something is wrong with him. Yep. Something is wrong with him. And it's different too, because they'll try so all of the insults, all the things that they insult women with, this is so important. Every single insult that you hear that they insult women with, what's funny is those are things that apply to the males, right? Like, for example, they'll say, oh, if you wait till you're too old, blah, 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 blah. Like, as a woman, if you wait till you're too old, then no one's going to want you. Meanwhile, males never even ask me how old I am. Why? Probably because they don't care, because they are hunters, right? So they feel like, oh, I just want to dominate this individual. If they look a certain way, if they look the part, or they seem like they would play the part that I want them to play, they don't care about age. They just want you to think that they care about stupid stuff like that. They don't care. They literally don't. Matter of fact, there's more males that will go for older women. Why? Because they don't care about age, but what they care about is your resources. They're hunters. They're predators, right? They care about your resources. So they know, and they're able to stick to code. And they're able to say, well, this lady's got a house. She's got this, she's got that. And she's about to kick the bucket probably. So then I can end up with all of that stuff, right? That's what they do. So it's kind of like, women try to do the same thing, I guess, when it comes to like dating rich males. But I feel like from what I'm seeing and from what I've seen, males are able to stick a lot more to code. Like they're more disciplined in their ruthlessness of sticking to code, while women are not as disciplined because their emotions get in the way. So they end up not really being able to play the same game effectively, because they're all these emotions, if they haven't trained themselves before starting to play this game, if they haven't trained themselves appropriately, they lose because their emotions are going to get in the way, versus males that don't really have any, or it's not that in depth emotionally for them. You know, they're easily sticking to code. And so what they're doing is they're hunting. And so for hunters, you got to think the last thing they're going to care about is your age. This is what I'm saying. Like, you have to understand how males actually think, because the reason they tell you that is so you get confused, so that you start looking at it from a woman's perspective without even knowing that that's what you're doing. Right? So that's the reason why they do that. So when they start saying things like spinster, or like, don't wait till you're too old, no one will want you. Meanwhile, all the younger males look for older women, because what? They're looking at your resources. They're looking at everything that you have, that you've built, and they're saying to themselves, this looks like a good deal to me based off of what I'm looking for. So it doesn't really, age never comes into play. I've never had a male even ask me how old I am. It's either looks, it's either like they're looking for resources, they're looking for control, power to dominate over certain types of looks or women. It's something more substantial than what they're telling you. Okay. Everyone ages. So it's a very stupid insult. So when they insult you, you got to think, because it's always going to be something dumb, right? It's a stupid insult to be like, oh, you age, so do it as quickly as you can. Everyone ages, including the same male that's telling you that. It's dumb, right? Like, so you got to look beneath the surface. Like, okay, why are they focusing on something that happens to everyone? That doesn't make any sense, right? What are they really trying to say, right? So it's like having to learn the male's language, right? With the same language that they speak, so that you can really understand what they're actually saying to you, as opposed to putting your own womanly, because women will always, like, I don't want to say flowers and rainbows, but they'll always almost like soften the blow based off of the way that they choose to interpret the message. But when you soften the blow, then you're not getting the real message that they're trying to tell you, right? So yeah, religion is a big problem. Hi, Religion Free. Thanks for joining today. So let me see something. I'm trying to, that chick, how do you pronounce that, your name? I wonder, I know that I'm mispronouncing it. Thank you for the compliment, by the way. I saw that earlier, but I think I was talking about the males and the importance of independence. So y'all, first and most important thing as a woman is being independent. You need the freedom. If you want to really experience everything that life has to give, you have to be independent for that. The males and the patriarchy will always want to trap you. Why? Because they don't want you to experience those things. For example, women giving birth. Did you know that when women are in labor and they're giving birth to a child, it actually is more painful to give birth when you're laying on your back? It's actually more painful for women to give birth laying on their back, but yet that's the status quo, right? You go to the hospital, you lay on your back, and you give birth in that way. So that's just like a micro example of that. So you have to understand that all of these rules, if you want to experience life to the fullest, you have to live outside of the rules. Okay. The thing is, men know that. Okay. And it comes very, very, very easily to them. It doesn't come as easily to women, because women are always, like, they're always, again, looking to soften the blow, right? They're always kind of like, well, this and that, to the point of delusion. Like literally, they're delusional, literally delusional, like sick individuals to that point, because that's the programming, that's the point of the programming. Okay. But to really truly build the life that you want, you have to play outside the rules. Okay, because the rules were not there and they were not made for you. They weren't made for you, right? So you have to play outside the rules, and you have to lean, in my opinion, you have to lean more into nature. Nature. You cannot go wrong when you lean into nature, period. Right? If you lean into nature, especially if you're like questioning something, you're not sure, just look at nature. See what she has to say about it, and whatever she says is it, right? So everything within the patriarchy is it's fake, right? Like it's not real. It's artificial, right? So if you really want to live life to the fullest, you can't do that playing an artificial game. You have to lean more towards nature. And then whatever nature says, you now have more power to kind of dictate how you want to reframe that game, right? Your hair's doing some things. You're so girly. I'm trying to be like you when I grow up. Thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. I try, like for example, how cute is this Hello Kitty thing? So ladies, you have to, I think ladies, and I say this for primarily because I know after the lives get posted. And we're going to be talking more and more about these types of things. So I really want more women to start looking at implementing these type of things in their real life. And I think, when we're online, we can talk about certain things, and sometimes we leave certain things out. And so that ends up creating more of a complicated situation for us. But as women, we need to really understand that, like, look, you're trying to play by rules. You're trying to play by rules that were not created for you and your best interest. The rules you're trying to play by don't even make sense. You know what I'm saying? Like, I see marriage as one of those rules. It doesn't even make sense, y'all. Like, when I'm telling you, you could literally tell people you're married without even being married, girl. You could literally get him to get you that giant diamond, if that's what you really want, is like a diamond or whatever. And you actually haven't even signed the papers. All you've done is you've looked for other contracts that are stronger, that fit better into your lifestyle, and you've both decided to sign those contracts instead, and you can have a ring. And you don't even have to tell people you're married. They'll just assume it. So you don't even have to lie. They'll just like do it for you, because that's how ingrained the patriarchy is, right? Doesn't even make any sense. Doesn't make any sense. So males, if you're going to be around males, they should really not be anything more than an accessory. And you make them more than an accessory when you have to coexist and share the same environment with them. It stops making sense for you, for women as a whole, when we do that. And that's what they don't want. That's why so many of them freak out with the declining birth rates. Because again, men biologically and based off of nature, they have to be codependent of women, because they come here through a woman. That's the only way that they can get here, is through a woman. Women don't have to do that. So if you're codependent, then there's something wrong, because you weren't made to be codependent by nature. Okay, that's a societal conditioning. Okay, and that's why when you have higher standards, you're able to have more control over your life. So you're able to create a happier life. You don't have to compromise as much just to be okay with the situation that you're in, right? So women are conditioned to not ask for much. So a lot of women will say, oh yeah, like I'm happy within my relationship, I'm happy within my marriage, this and that, because they've kind of like conformed to the bare minimum of what life is. And so they'll never live beyond that bare minimum, right? You can even see it with other statistics. For example, statistically speaking, more men ask for raises and increase in pay than women do. Women usually don't even ask for a raise. They don't even ask. You know, they don't even, when they get a new job, they don't even negotiate. Most men negotiate for their salaries, most women don't, right? So you see it in every area, not just in relationships. That's the thing, that's the key, right? And the key to everything is really women, I feel like, because if you have more and more women saying, no, I don't really want that. I don't really want a male that's going to do this. I don't want a male that's going to do that. He needs to have this. He needs to have that. Well, that ends up forcing males to, as a mass, to step up their pretending game. You know what I mean? Like, it's like they're going to have to step up their, you know, pretending game and stop offering below bare minimum whatever it is that they're offering, especially if they know that women don't even want to live with them at this point, right? And the irony is, by nature, that's the preferred state of males. Like, males prefer to be challenged and to play like a never-ending game, versus women that prefer to live in this kind of like fantasy world where everything is glittery and all this stuff, right? Now, that fantasy world, again, is something that was created through the patriarchy. So it's not something that's created by nature, but that's kind of where males and women differ, you know, based off of those things. Yeah, you have to have higher standards, and you have to be willing to wait. Like, that's another thing. A lot of women get, you know, they get to rushing and being impatient, and they don't understand that, like, the same caliber that you might have been able to get when you're older, you're not going to get that, because now you've gotten yourself stuck with this same caliber of male that you got yourself stuck with in your early 20s. You know, so you could have gotten so much better if you would have just worked on yourself and increased your standards and been patient. But now you're kind of stuck with this emotional attachment to this low standard that you now have to force yourself to be okay with. You now have to force yourself to be happy in, as you know, as long as he's not being abusive, he's not abusing you. You know, so women need to, I feel like, start, and they are, I feel like, starting to understand that there's no benefit to you for you to rush your own process. It's epically stupid. It's like you're rushing yourself for no reason. Like, literally, just take your time. That's what males don't want. That's why they tell you, do it while you're young, this and that. Like, you could, even if you wanted a kid, you could literally just have a kid without a male there, because most of the time the males don't help with the parenting. You end up wasting your life and your time. It's way more peaceful for you to like have a kid by yourself once you're older than for you to like be stuck with a kid when you're younger, and you probably don't even have the resources to take care of yourself, nor do you have the resources to take care of that kid. And now you're holding on to the male because you don't got no resources. So there's, like, it creates a domino effect of problems. It creates a continuous domino effects of problems. And then on a societal level, it creates this societal problem of a bunch of like incel males, a bunch of males that are not useful to society as a whole, to other people as a whole, you know, and it's a domino effect. It just keeps dominoing, right? And then it prevents humans as a species from evolving. And then what happens? Well, you evolve, or you're no longer going to be here. on planet Earth, because planet Earth and Mother Nature is continuously evolving, whether you like it or not. So it's like this domino effect, right? There's no real rush. It's like literally, unless you're putting the pressure on yourself. And one thing the patriarchy is really good at is making you believe otherwise. They make it seem like there is a rush. You should be in a hurry. You should do all these things before you're even ready to like do any of those things. You know, you should, you should focus all of your energy on a male. You should focus all of your energy on depending on someone else and putting your future in someone else's hands. You should take that risk. Everything is a rush, 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 rush if you listen to the patriarchy, because that's what they want you to believe. But if you detach from the patriarchy, you start to realize, well, that doesn't make any sense, because if I'm always rushing, then how am I going to experience today? How am I going to get to where I actually would want to be? How am I going to know where I actually want to be if I'm always rushing through every day, right? Like, there's a certain balance that needs to happen there. And, that's kind of the most important thing. So the first thing is, I think, financial independence. And it's hard to say that because a lot of women are like, they don't want to work. So I guess this wouldn't work for them, just because it's like, if you don't want to work, then I don't really know. I don't know how you would get there. I don't know any other way of really getting to the utmost point of happiness. And then the second thing is freedom, right? So creating a world for yourself where you're able to work only if and when you want to. For example, you're able to go out only if or when you want to. You're able to clean only if and when you want to. You're able to like decorate in the way only if and when you want to. So creating a world that you fully control, I think, is really important as well. So there's that. So I think starting with those two things, it's a mental thing. Like, if you don't have the resources, whether or not you're in a relationship won't matter. You're just going to be putting yourself in more danger than you need to be. Because if you're going to be in a relationship with a male, then that means now you're depending on this male. And what happens if he doesn't come through? Now what? So it really doesn't make sense. And even if he does come through, now you've hit a plateau. Like, you've hit a ceiling of potential experiences. And what is life if not experiences? You've hit a plateau because you've kind of like cornered yourself, right? And now you're limited as to the experiences that you're able to have, because you're not playing by your own rules. You're playing by these societal rules, right? So that's another thing. And it's really saddening when I see women that have kids at such a young age, because it's sad for the women, but it's also sad for the children. And it's sad that like society has normalized bringing kids here, despite whether or not it's in the best interest of the child themselves that they're bringing here. And that's something that we have to keep in mind as well, because if you're choosing, this is for the women that are choosing to do this, or that have other options, then that creates a problem, because you're bringing kids here at this young age. You haven't found yourself. How is the child supposed to learn how to find themselves? They would have to get extremely, extremely lucky in order to get that skill set. And most of the time that doesn't happen. What ends up happening is you keep repeating the same generational mistakes. So generation after generation gets stuck. You get stuck. Your generations get stuck in a loop. They get stuck in one place, because you didn't do what needed to be done, right? So I don't know. There's just a lot that goes into it, but becoming independent is the first step, I think. Can you become independent by dating a male and like marrying one? Yes and no, because you've traded a lot of that same independence that you're trying to get just to be with the male in the first place. So it's kind of like you're going from one trap to like just a different type of box. You're going from one box to a different type of box. That's literally the only thing that's changing, is like one box differs from the next box. So it just ends up being a situation where I think if you're going to deal with them, just be realistic and don't live with them. Don't ever live with them. Biologically speaking and by nature, that was never meant to be. That's not how it's supposed to go. It's really not. So when you get yourself trapped like that 24/7 with one individual, there's going to be problems, and then you have to trick your own mind into believing that you're happy, even though you're not. You're just kind of used to whatever it is your life looks like. You're just kind of used to it. Meanwhile, there's other people, other women traveling the world, seeing different things, meeting different types of males, because there's like way more males than there should be on this earth anyways, and tapping into potential that you could never even at this point dream of, because you've gotten yourself stuck in this situation, right? They're, shopping, seeing different things, experiencing different things. And what else are you going to do with your time here if that's not what you're doing? You know what I'm saying? Like, you're going to be here, you're going to leave, it's going to be it, So I think those become really, really important. But starting with the mindset, that's what I find that most women lack. It's like they think they're independent, but they're actually not. It's the mindset. It's here, right? Like, for I don't know. It's just like the example we were talking about earlier, where the women that are married are pushing 4B, but you're married. 4B is the opposite of that. That's not making any sense. It's the same thing, where there's a certain lack of authenticity. There's a disconnect. And that's why it's coming up more and more as people, because that's another thing, is like people do change and evolve. And so the stakes keep getting higher and higher. So as people start recognizing that, you're going to start getting more questions from people that are saying, that doesn't make sense. Like, and from women that are saying, that doesn't make sense. You're married. So what are you talking about? Then what are you going to do? Because there's a disconnect between your message and your lifestyle, so it ends up being a difficult situation. Yeah, their married women are just an ally of 4B. That's good. We talked about how that is a good thing that they're supporting 4B. At the same time, though, a lot of those women will go into, saying how men are this or men are that. Meanwhile, they're attached to a man, So that's going to create a situation where, the women will start wondering, like, well, I don't get it, because you're attached to a male and all of you claim to have a good male. They all claim that theirs is good and different. And yet they'll say that it's rare. Well, it can't be that rare because that's the same excuse that all of you are giving. So that's it just creates more questions. So I think it just comes down to a little bit of a lack of authenticity between the message and the lifestyle of the person delivering the message. It would be different if, I guess it would be a little bit different if they were promoting 4B and in favor of 4B, but they also took just as much time to, maybe talk about how they got into the relationship that they're in, the dynamics, what they had to look out for, maybe shine more light on the other sides as well, not just on primarily this one side that's, I guess, giving them more clicks and views. I don't know. It might be different if they did that. Maybe less women would start wondering or asking these questions. But I think what's happening is because they are kind of not aligned, their lifestyle is not aligned with their message. It might create, and it's creating some confusion there. Now for me, me specifically, I'm going to do whatever I want. So regardless of what anybody else is saying, I do whatever I want to do. I'm going to do whatever I want, whatever fits in for me. But I think, most women that that are watching this, they're watching it to maybe take certain notes and stuff. So it's important to create, to balance out the perspectives if your life is not directly aligning with the core of the message. Then you might have to go in and create one or two more additional perspectives so that we get a fuller picture of what's actually happening. Okay, well, how did you get to where you are? Because you're telling us most males are bad and they're this, and yet you claim your male is different, but yet that's what they all claim, is that their males are different. And all of y'all's males can't be different, but yet you're saying and telling other women to not go, so you have to, I think, address those perspectives head on. But I mean, they're fair, they're all valid arguments. I think that 4B is a spectrum, and the more supporters of 4B, the better. But I also think that those are valid arguments that, there's no other choice but to address them. Otherwise, if you try to sweep them under the rug, they come out even more in more full force than before, and it becomes even more of a bigger issue, right? So I think a more authentic message for women that are married would be to, okay, go 4B until you're ready to date, or until you know what you're looking for. It has to be something that makes more sense with their lifestyle. But what I'm seeing is a lot of them are just saying, go 4B, don't date males, don't deal with them, they suck. Meanwhile, they're attached to a male. So that's what's going to create confusion for people, and they're going to start potentially pointing fingers at you for that. But I mean, I'm the type of individual, I do whatever I want regardless. But I just know I've been getting that comment a lot more on my own channel about other people, and I feel like, look, y'all should probably start addressing that, because these women are gonna start addressing it for you if you don't. Because women are very, they're gonna start bringing that more, and it's like the elephant in the room. They're gonna start bringing it up more and more and more and more, and it's gonna be valid. It's going to be valid because there's a dissonance between what you're saying and your lifestyle. They will have a good point. Right. So, yeah. I think lots of married women are just following the trend of 4B to make money. Yeah. I think so too. I think a lot of them are just kind of following the trend. A lot of them are doing it probably for clicks and views, but their life doesn't look, when I see, there are certain content creators that I see that promote dating men for money. Actually, not, there's one content creator in particular that I'm thinking about that promotes that. And I feel like she's more authentic than a lot of these other women that are promoting 4B. I feel like her life and her messaging makes sense to me because the life is matching the message. There's alignment. right? And that's probably what makes it to where when there's alignment and then the timing is right, you get an explosion of women coming to you. Oh, this and that, though, you're more likely to have more women listening to you because it makes more sense. And that creates an interesting problem when that type of messaging has more alignment than women that are saying that they are promoting the 4B, but yet their life does not align with the 4B, right? So that creates an issue in that, like, well, that doesn't make sense because what we're trying to fight is huge. It's a patriarchy. It's a whole patriarchy, right? It's the main thing about a patriarchy is telling women that they have to attach themselves to a male and having women believe that. Well, you are attached to a male. So I think from thinking about it and seeing the comments from different women, it makes sense to me because there's a disalignment between the messaging and the lifestyle. And that is going to create more questions, and where more women are feeling like, like, where's this coming from because you're married? And so if the primary point of the content, you just keep saying things like, don't get a male, don't get a, meanwhile you're married and stuff, like, at a young age at that, it's not even like you're older and like you did it when you were older, like you're literally like pretty young, so you got attached pretty young and pretty quick. You're going to have more women asking questions about that. But I personally like different types of content. I'm able to watch content from an objective standpoint, and I'll just take in the content for the content itself, not necessarily for the messenger where that the content is coming from, because I create my life in such a different way from what society says that we're supposed to do, that it doesn't even matter anyway. It would literally, everything that I do would have to be tailored to my lifestyle for it to work anyways. So yeah, that's the thing. If you started out 4B as a single woman, then she get married. Should the woman stop expressing 4B on social media or pretend she's not married? No, I don't think I think, again, it goes back to this is what I think. Like, I believe that it goes back to just remaining authentic as you can be all throughout your journey, right? So even if you grow or evolve or change your mind on something, like infusing that continuously in your messaging so that people are not confused or feel like it's a sudden thing that just happened, right? Like, I think that's where it comes from. Like, for example, even for me in my messaging, I know, like, look, I'm never getting married, but I say all the time, even if I were to find myself in that type of situation, I literally would probably just never live with a male, and I would just sign different types of contracts, right? So when people hear that, they're able to, better align your message with the lifestyle, and it creates less dissonance. So no, if you do that, then as long as it makes sense for where you are currently, and you're continuing to make sure that it makes sense as you evolve, like, as you don't just, like, if you're evolving but your message stays here, people are going to be like, what's that? Like, what's going on there, right? Like, if your message is here but you're evolving or you're changing, so your life is doing this but your message is still here. Okay. And then someone finds out that this is where you're at. Well, you're going to have a problem because people are going to be like, but I don't get it though. So like they're going to be more confused. So I think that's why I chose like independent pretty girlies, because that independent piece, like we've been talking about, it transcends relationship dynamics. Whether or not you're in a relationship, it transcends that. You can be even more independent if you're not in a relationship. That's where you're supposed to build from. That's where you're supposed to start from. You're not supposed to rush yourself. You're not supposed to not be independent and then attach yourself to a male. In my opinion, it's too risky, unnecessarily risky for women, right? So that's where I went with my messaging, because that independence piece, once you build it, that's you have that foundation, right? So I thought to myself, how can I align the message with, how can I best align the message with my actual current lifestyle so it's easier for me to talk about, right? Like, for example, like I have businesses. I'm continuing to work on building more businesses. I have my own home. I have all these things, so there's a foundation there, that you want to align with. Otherwise, if you change your mind in the future and your thing was here this whole time, this is when you start getting women saying that's not making any sense, because you're clearly married and you're telling the rest of us not to do that, but then you claim that yours is different, and all of you are making that same claim. So, you're gonna get, that's when you start getting stuff like that. You know what I mean? What are your thoughts on married women who promote 4B? I don't have a problem with it, but I'm curious to hear your perspective. And how old are you, if you don't mind me saying? Yeah, I think, my thoughts on women that promote 4B, married women. Okay. Because I was like, I like women that promote 4B, but married women, my thoughts on married women that promote 4B is, they have to be, it is a little bit more restraining for them. They have to understand and come in understanding that, look, your message is not aligning with the movement that you're promoting. Sorry, your lifestyle. Your lifestyle is not aligning with the message that you're promoting. So I believe that if you're going to promote something like 4B and you're married, that's something that you should plan for before you start promoting it. Like, you should plan for how you're going to do that, because that should stand out to you as a red flag when you think about the fact that, like, okay, you want to promote something that's like 4B. 4B is not dealing with males at all. That's what 4B is, not dealing with males. You can do it on somewhat of a spectrum, but not that much of a spectrum. Like, you're literally married. Not that, like, that's way outside of anything that you can reasonably say that 4B is. So if you're going to come in trying to promote 4B, my best advice and what I would do if I were in that situation is I would have to sit back and think about how I'm going to go about delivering this message with the cognitive dissonance in mind, with the challenge of knowing that I'm married and I'm delivering this message. And I would also have to sit down and try to understand why I'm delivering this message if I myself am married. Like, to me, it wouldn't make any sense to deliver that message if I'm married. It really wouldn't make any sense to me, because it's like, it would be so different. Like, it would just not make sense to me, in my mind, to deliver the message to others if I know that I'm married. So that's where the planning comes into play. Like, you have to, like, think about, okay, why do I want to deliver the message and how am I going to do it to where it makes sense? And you're not going to be able to plan for that if it doesn't even make sense to you, and you're just doing it just because it's like what people are talking about now, like, it's like the newest thing. So um so this the question is, then what do you think about YV Edit and Burn and Bougie, who promotes the message? I think those content creators will be fine. Thanks. Great response. Thanks. I think those content creators will be fine. I think the people that get the most affected are the viewers. So I don't really think anything in particular about the content creators. I don't know. To me, I kind of feel like in person, they're probably good people. So I am able to, well, I don't know if they're good people or not. I'm just assuming that. But like, I'm able to kind of like separate pretty easily. But I think that I think the right question, and really the question to really think about is not what do I think about those content creators, it's what do I think about what it's going to do to the people that are watching that message and getting conflicting information from the message. It really doesn't really affect the content creators that much. What it does is it gets them views and clicks and all these other things that are probably good for them. So it's not really them that it's affecting, it's the viewer. It's the viewer that it's affecting, you know. I'm judging them as people. I'm just curious why they promote that women don't get married, but they're married. I wonder if they have cognitive dissonance and actually are miserable in their marriages. I don't know if they're miserable in their marriages. I think they've probably just settled. I mean, because once you get married, that you can't really just get out of it. Like, you can't just get out of it like that. Like, especially if you're a woman, you kind of trap yourself psychologically. Like I explained this earlier in the live, like we even use it in psychology in my field. We literally, like, if we're working with addicts, for example, we get the addicts to write out a contract and sign the contract. If we're working with like SI, we get them to write out a contract and sign the contract. So it's a very, very strong psychological tool. So it's not an easy thing to get out of, especially for women that tend to be so emotional. Unless it's so bad, unless there's like DV, and a lot of women will even stay through DV. Really the biggest thing that gets women to leave is cheating. Oh, I found out he cheated on me. Meanwhile, he's been putting hands on you this whole time, but they stay, right? So once you sign such a contract, such a binding contract with someone, psychologically, you know, you're going to kind of be stuck there, and your brain is going to have to rewire itself to conform, right? It's just accept whatever it is that you're stuck in. Otherwise, it's going to be an even more dreadful experience. So I agree with you. I don't think that they're at the utmost happiness. The women that I see that might be fairly content and truly innately happy in their marriages are women that usually aren't talking about their husbands online. Like, it's like people know that they're married, but those women are usually talking about other things. Like, they're blogging, they took a trip to Japan the other day, and they're, you know, you barely even remember that these women are married. Okay, like those are more, I'm more convinced, because I don't know what their situation is either, but I'm more convinced by those type of women when they talk about that. But the ones that talk about 4B, I think that they probably just from a subconscious level settled. Either that, or, you know, it's mainly because talking about 4B is what got their channel going. It's what people want to hear about. So that's what they're saying and talking about. It's not necessarily because they themselves are living it in their own lives, right? Yeah. So you believe there is some level of cognitive dissonance, then, like the message they're promoting are not necessarily their reality, but they're just convincing themselves that they are happy. Yeah, I think that there's definitely cognitive dissonance in the sense of like the viewer's standpoint. I think it's hard to say for the content creator if they're going through cognitive dissonance, or if they're just doing it for clicks and views, because it really could be either or. They could be legitimately going through cognitive dissonance in the sense of, you know, saying that they are happy even though they're not happy in reality, or they could just be doing it for clicks and views, or they probably just settled. They've settled, and so now that low bar has become what is happy to them. And now they have kids and stuff, if they have kids. So it's hard to say from the content creator's perspective, but one thing that we do know for a fact is that, look, there's a dissonance, objectively speaking. Okay, because objectively speaking, you're telling women to do 4B and all this other stuff, but you're married. That's really the most important part, because it's the women that that's your audience. That's who you're talking to. So their perspective is going to come into play when they're seeing that, well, your life isn't really aligning. So what's really going on? That's when you start getting speculation, like maybe it's cognitive dissonance, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. That's the reason why. That's where it comes from. Yeah. What do you think about a married Black male with children, social media content creators who claim to be feminists, claim to be anti-red pill, and promote women liberation from patriarchy? Males. So basically the question is, what do I think about males who are promoting feminism because they're males, right? And I guess Black males in particular, married Black males in particular. I don't listen to males. That's just when it comes to things like feminism, and them doing it on social media, that is just my preference, because I feel like men and women are different. Women, we're talking to each other when we're talking about these things, which is where we're supposed to be, is talking to each other, because we've learned through centuries that, look, you can't talk a male into learning or into evolving. They can't do it. But when men start doing that, I cannot take them seriously on any level, because they're males. See what I'm saying? Like, really, if the male is serious about that, you would see it in real life. They just be doing it in their actions. So the males that are talking about it online, I don't know. I don't really listen to as much, just because I can't really take them seriously, because they're males. Just from a biological standpoint, I'm already questioning it, because you're not even close to knowing what the experience is like for women. So what could you possibly tell me, someone who is a woman? You see what I'm saying? Like, it's not going to be all that useful to me, because our experiences are different. I think that, if they are talking to other males, then that's different. But the ones that sit here talking to women, I don't get that. I think that there's a good chance that's just for clicks and views, because you don't have to tell us. The problem that we're having is that your bros are out of control. So why are you sitting here talking to us? Like, logically speaking, to me, it doesn't make sense. Like, but you have a lot of women that fall for that, because they're still looking for male validation and don't even realize that that's what they're looking for, right? But in my opinion, I kind of feel like it's kind of a waste of my time to watch a male speaking on things that are a woman's experience, speaking to women. Like, go talk to your bros, because that's the problem that we're having, is that you keep trying to talk to us instead of trying to talk to them, and tell them the same things that you're telling us, that we already know and we're already talking to each other about. So I mean, I think it's, at least the messaging is not like negative. So that's good. I think that's a win, because the messaging itself is not negative. But don't really listen to a lot of males that talk about that stuff, because I just feel like I can't connect with a male, talking about stuff that's women related, because like you're not a woman, so what would you know? And it's like, you don't, why are you talking to us? Go talk to your bros. Like, I mean, I feel like it doesn't make sense to me, as much as, sticking to women when it comes to those types of topics. Yeah. Let me see. Go back here. Yeah, I love that question, by the way. That was a good question, Sonia. And Miss Apples. I'll say the Apples. I don't want to mispronounce your first name, right? But that was a good question as well. Those were good questions. I agree. I believe that Burb and YV Edit are having some cognitive dissonance issues and are not being honest with their reality because they don't talk or focus on other stuff. Yeah. I mean, but then I said this in my other live too. Like, I'm very lenient on women in general. So I just feel like the messaging is positive. So as the viewer, it becomes more important to figure out how you're going to categorize that messaging. Like for me, it's not really that important for me, because if I'm listening to it, I'll just take the piece that I feel like is useful and move on. But I don't spend a lot of time, I mostly watch vlogs actually, and financial stuff and economic stuff. Actually, that's most of where my time goes if I'm watching something on YouTube. But yeah, I think it is a certain level of cognitive dissonance, just logically speaking, because it just doesn't align. It's just from a lot, we can't, I mean, there's, from a logical perspective, the messaging doesn't align. So I get where that sentiment might be coming from, for sure. Yeah, like talk about travel, self-improvement, or anything else outside of romantic relationships. I get tired of male-centered content those two promote. Yeah. So that's where I think that, the most dissonance happens, because I think there's a real opportunity there for, ladies, even if they're married, to contribute to the conversation, just in more of a more in a way that aligns with their current lifestyle. But then again, it's hard to say just that, because we do know that people will only click on certain things. So that's also true. Like, if you're not talking about the latest thing, if you're not, it's going to be hard for you to like build, because people will only click on certain things. So there's this kind of like aspect to it. But like I said, for me, not much of a difference, because I end up doing whatever I want regardless. But I've just seen that coming up more and more on my channel, which I don't even have anything to do with that type of, I don't have anything to do with that. But so if I'm seeing it, I can only imagine like the elephant in the room, Yeah. So yeah, and women love to watch male content and give them super chats. Yeah, they do. Yeah, there's a lot of women, they love watching males. I don't know. I think it's probably part of the patriarchal conditioning. It's just like talking about males, I just take it as long as the messaging isn't negative, then there's that, like at least it's not negative. The messaging itself isn't negative. So that's a win in and of itself. But I personally don't spend a lot of time watching that or being there, just because I don't connect to it as much, because it leaves me with too many questions, more questions than answers. And I just kind of feel like, look, there's all these males that are going rogue out here. Like, why are you not focusing on talking to them? That's why we continue to have this issue. So it's not bad. I don't think it's bad that they're talking to women. I just think that it's so unnecessary, and it's like, women are already taught to each other, so it's lost potential and lost opportunity, in my opinion. So yeah, that if the messaging is positive, so that's good. I think that that's a good place to start. I just think this is what keeps us from, as like, as a society in general, it keeps us from evolving, because like evolving like we're supposed to, or at the pace that we're supposed to, just because, you know, there's a lot of things that we could be doing that we end up not really doing. But I don't believe that it's saying that these are bad individuals. I just think it's a matter of where is the energy being, where are we putting the energy, right? Where are we, what are we saying? And so I think it really just comes down to, it's going to come down to like, the viewers being able to figure out how to navigate and process through all that information, how they want to go about navigating and processing through the information. But I will say that, it's important for women to be careful of taking a lot of that content in, that taking a lot of that dissonance in, because you're going to take that in whether you like it or not, because the person that is saying 4B or whatever the case may be is married. So on a subconscious level, you're going to be thinking to yourself, well, wait a second, you might start blaming yourself. You might start feeling like you're not good enough. It's going to, on a subconscious level, affect you if you don't manage that appropriately. And so, I think that's the most important thing, Unfortunately, a lot of males won't listen to women, but will listen to men. Exactly. Yeah. Also, laws won't change without the support of men. Exactly. So I think we need men on our side. And speaking about feminism, exactly, I agree. But what I don't agree with is they're speaking to women. That's why I say it's lost potential. It's like the men need to be speaking to other men, but they're sitting here and they tailor when I say they're speaking to women, they're tailoring their message to women. It's completely useless. It's so useless. I can't even explain how useless that is, because women as a whole, we're already better functioning than males on a mass scale. That's not saying all of us, but on a mass scale, generally speaking. So it's true. Like, for us to have a better functioning society overall, the males need to do better. And in my opinion, they're not doing better by sitting here tailoring the message to women. It's just they do it. They tailor the message to women because women are the ones that listen. We listen. And who doesn't like people that support them? I can't even say anything particularly negative about them, because look, they're supporting women. You see, like, everyone, who doesn't like people that support them? The problem that I see with that is it's missed and lost opportunity, and it's pointless, because you're not tailoring your message to talking to other men. When you make your thumbnails or whatever, or going out of your way to like really make sure that this message is reaching men and not women in particular. So if that's you're not really doing anything. It's not changing anything because it's not hitting the right audience. But I completely agree. Like, the laws and everything, that it supports males. So it would be males that need to be targeted. But the problem is, and I think the question was, there's a lot of women that support that stuff. Yeah. And that's the question. You could also argue that if women were more discerning, that might help fix the issue. I think that could be an argument. What do I mean by that? Like, if women were more like discerning, more choosy, less desperate for male validation, they wouldn't click on the male content as much. So the males would be forced to think outside the box. Like, okay, these women aren't clicking on this content. People aren't clicking on this. How do I elevate it? Or how do I, but because the support continues to come from women, they don't really have to, do everything that they can to direct the message towards males, right? And so they don't. So it just ends up being missed opportunity, I think, for something greater, so that's just kind of what I think about that. That's why I think women have to not listen to content creators they don't know are authentic. Yeah, I mean, maybe I'm too lenient, but I just feel like it's hard to, it's just, if you're not authentic on the most basic level where it's like so obvious, then, you might want to just take it with a grain of salt, I guess. But you can't really know someone on a deep level through like social media. So it's hard to tell. And it's hard to tell women, specifically what to listen to and what not to listen to. But what I can say and what I can see is the results of what the decisions that are being made are on a mass scale, right? So for example, like, women are the ones that are supporting the males, the married males, talking about feminism and pushing feminism, which are both great messages to push. Love that they're pushing that message. Women shouldn't be the ones supporting that. We shouldn't even really know about that. That should be nothing but males in that chat room, right? Because if it's just us women, that's not really doing much. Women are the oppressed. So you're not doing much by continuing to do what we can and are already doing for ourselves. You see what I'm saying? So it's nice because we have even more support and it feels good. It's nice, but how useful is it really? That's really the question that comes to mind with that. I work in a male-dominated field. Men literally don't challenge other men. Yeah, men literally don't challenge other men's views. They just shrug their shoulders and move on. They do not try to challenge each other or change their perspectives. Bingo. And that's the problem. See, because women, we can only do so much for ourselves, which is why you see, you can just literally watch. You don't even have to, you can see what the results are on a mass scale of these decisions, right? Like, now there's more women not wanting to even deal with or date males. That is one of the results of your males being subpar. They don't listen to each other. They don't keep each other accountable. Why? Because they're all scared of each other. Males know their own true nature. So they're all scared of each other. So all these messages, they direct it towards women, but you're wasting your time by doing that. You're not really, if you're a male, I don't even think that he's doing his part. I don't think the male can do his part if he's like sitting here talking to women. Like, no, because males already don't listen to women. Okay, so who's talking to the males? Who is talking to those males? Andrew Tate? See what I'm saying? Like, that's where the males are. That's where they're conglomerating, right? So if you're a male and you're sitting here talking to us and you're not pushing to get into the manosphere or the males, you're not useful. You're not doing anything useful, right? Because women, we get taught to all day long. The patriarchy tries to talk to us all day long. You should be doing this. You shouldn't be doing this. You should be doing that. You should wear this. You shouldn't be wearing that. We don't need more males talking at us, right? So even if you're supporting us, which is like great, feels good, you're supporting us, that's fantastic. But it's not really doing anything that's in the women's best interest, because it's not women that can talk to these males. These males won't listen to women. It's males, and you're a male. So that's who you should really be talking to, not here. But that's just, I mean, that's my opinion. I don't know. I think women listen to them because it feels satisfying to hear a man agree with them. But yeah, that doesn't really help the world. It just provides entertainment. Exactly. It feels satisfying. It feels nice to have people agreeing with you, to have people supportive of you. All of those things feel nice, but like we talk about all the time, like the real world, emotions aren't going to get you anywhere in the real world. If you base your life on emotions, you're not going to get anywhere. So all of those things are nothing but feelings. So what happens is we end up focusing on feelings and end up doing nothing to actually change the real world. We're just focusing on just the feelings. So it is pointless. Okay. And I think women share the blame on that, because it's like, if these men weren't getting that attention, again, these men would be forced to reevaluate who they're directing the message to. But unfortunately, women are more willing to listen to women like myself. They're more willing to listen to males than they are to listen to women like myself. It's like they're that thirsty for that male validation. Like before even listening to a woman like myself, they'll go and listen to males, and be happy because it's a male saying these things. And it's good that it's a male saying these things, but it's pointless because they're saying it to women. So women are acting against their own self-interest. It's from a global societal perspective, when you sit back and actually watch the show, as opposed to being in it, when you sit back and actually watch the show, you're like, why do these women keep doing that? They're literally fighting against themselves. Yeah, men like Andrew Tate, because he's promoting patriarchal philosophy of males being superior, they don't listen to content about emotional intelligence because they only care about power and control. Yeah, that's true too. I mean, that's another reason why these males target women, like the ones that are for feminism. That's another reason why they target women, is because it's almost impossible for, like, males don't really listen. For example, the military. I use the military as an example all the time. How do they train males before women were even allowed? Because it's based off of males, because they didn't even allow women into the military, right? So all of that training based off of males. So how do they do it? What did they develop? Well, consequences, punishment, and hardcore consequences and punishment, because that's the only way that males learn. And so they are not really conditioned, and they are not really able to listen from an emotional perspective, and much less from an emotional intelligence perspective, right? So it becomes more of a challenge. But there is a way. I mean, just earlier in this live, I was telling women to capture the way in which males think. Capture the way in which they speak and reflect it back to them. And the only thing that stays the same is your message. Like, you literally could tell males they suck to their face, and they'll accept the messaging depending on how you're packaging it. But that takes a lot of work. Takes a lot of work to learn how to do that and to do it. And most males are just lazy. They don't want to do it, right? So they'll sit here and they don't, it's too faceted, right? The males that are watching that content, power and control is the only thing they care about, and they want to get it in the easiest way humanly possible. Okay. So they'll sit here and they'll only choose misogynistic content. Okay. And then the males that are addressing women and mostly have women and tailoring the message towards, what women want to hear, as opposed to figuring out how to infiltrate the male space. It's the same thing. It's kind of like laziness, because you're a male. Who better to be able to do that than another male, right? So it's like the males have a too fast, like it's a big issue, because the males are devolving, and they're devolving at an alarming rate. It's like at an alarming rate. All the numbers across the board, they're not working anymore. There's no sense of purpose that they have. I mean, it's a mess, and they can't figure out how to get it together. And personally, I don't really think they're going to be able to get it together, because this is a result of several years, decades, centuries of conditioning for them. And you can see it in the smallest things, the things that look positive, even, like, oh, these males, they're into feminism, they're into supporting women, even in the smallest things, you can see that, look, these males are not going to make it, because they're into feminism, they're into supporting women, yet women are the only ones in your chat giving you money. That's a problem, so where are your males? Where are they? Like, they're the ones that are supposed to be listening to that message, so on a societal standpoint, big problem. And I think they see that, but I don't think there's going to be anything that they can do about it in particular, because the more they try to restrain certain things, the more women are going to go into survival mode. And that's what you're seeing, where more and more women are saying, no, 4B, don't want to date you, don't want to talk to you, don't want anything to do with you. Or more and more women are just choosing to do it when they're older. Like, no, I don't want to get married in my 20s. I don't want to do it in my 30s, maybe my late 30s or in my 40s. Then we'll see. That in and of itself is fighting the patriarchy already, because the patriarchy doesn't want you YOLOing it out through your 20s and your 30s. They don't want you experiencing and having fun so that you can then just end up upping your standards, and then it's even more difficult for males to take advantage of you, right? They don't want that for you. So even just the fact that women are choosing to have kids later in life, that women are choosing to go to school, that they're choosing an education or choosing to build businesses, presents a very, 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 very big problem for the patriarchy. And that's also going to mean that birth rates are going to continue to decline if women keep doing that, because the more wealth that people have, the more education that they have, the more of a foundation that they have building, guess what happens? The less kids that they're likely to birth it, right? Like, they're not going to sit here and bring in 1 million kids, because they're going to be thinking, well, that's kind of expensive now, isn't it? What kind of life will that? They'll think more about these decisions, right? So they have a big problem, because it's like, even your males can't get through your males. That's why you keep talking to women, because women are the only ones that are listening. And I mean, it's great for us, because it's like, women, we enjoy hearing you are on our side. Fantastic. But when we sit back and think about it, it's like, well, you're not really being all that useful now, are you? It's more for entertainment purposes, which I guess is okay, but that's what it comes down to. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. The males are screwed and will be for a long time, until they humble themselves and get out of the toxic thinking. They will remain as is, and women will just focus on themselves. Yeah, it's a survival thing, because the thing is, the patriarchy, such a fragile thing when you look back and look at what we have here from an objective standpoint. It's very, very fragile, right? And so the males find themselves in a very, very difficult situation because it doesn't really take much from women for them to start crumbling. It really doesn't. It really does. Like literally, as soon as women start saying, I don't want to have a family in my 20s, I'd much rather start one in my 30s, it's the beginning of the end for males. Okay. Because there's so much that happens within that time, and women will up their standards. They want different things. They might want to travel. They will seek other forms of fulfillment. So you have less women that are willing to tolerate DV, so which means the males have less control. And one of the main purposes of making sure that women live with males, living with males in the same house, is so males can feel like they have control. They have an environment that they control, right? They can kind of feel like kings, like they don't feel like kings at work, but when they get home, they can feel like the king, the ruler of that domain, right? Well, that's not going to play quite as well if you're dealing with older women that have more experience and have older women that have their own domains, that have their own house, have their own things, that's why males chase younger women. So many of them will chase younger women because younger women don't have those resources, right? So on every level, we start to see the patriarchy freaking out. It's crumbling because what they've created here was so fragile to begin with, and it was a creation, an artificial creation that cannot outpace the need for evolution and nature herself, no matter how hard they continue to try. Okay. I mean, we see it over and over again where the oppressed gets tired of being oppressed, and now you have a problem. And now you have to pretend like you haven't been part of the oppressors this whole time because it's creating more and more issues. So now you're like, oh, no, I've been into women's rights this whole time. Let's go ahead and make it legal. When this whole time your stuff was crumbling anyways, because the women are starting to speak out more and more about it. You're starting to have more issues. Now you want to assimilate, acting as though, no, this is where we were going the whole time. So I tell women all the time, like, listen, even the laws that we have, the laws that are in place today, laws aren't based off of the government coming up with something that they feel like is good for humanity. Laws are based off of what human beings are already doing. The laws come after. Like marriage, that came after. People were already writing out their own contracts, doing their own thing. And when people start doing that, the government and religions and the patriarchy loses more control. So in order to regain control, they make it seem like, oh, no, we were already going there. So we're going to put it as a law, so it's like, and then people get confused because they don't know history and they think that that's where it originated. Meanwhile, no, that's not where it originated. People were already doing it to the point where the government had to notice and say, okay, we should probably follow that trend. It's not the other way around, right? So that's kind of like, I feel like the main thing. So the males are fumbling right now because it doesn't really take much for women to crumble this patriarchy. All women have to do is choose something different. That's literally it. Like, even if they don't if they choose to have kids, if they do it at a later age, in their 30s, late 30s, early 40s, that's crumbling the patriarchy right then and there. Okay, because that means that if you do it in a later age, you're less likely to have a million kids. Most of the time, you might maybe have one. You're less likely to prioritize taking care of the male as though he's a king over your own experiences. So the males fight back. This is why when you see the males fighting back so hard against such simple things that look so simple, when they talk about your age, for example, and they try to like shame you for your age, or it seems simple, but it's not, because the patriarchy is very fragile. So it really just takes one little tweak from the woman's perspective for that thing to start chipping away, right? Even women that choose to only have one child, that's not useful really to the patriarchy. To maintain this, the minimum children that women have to have is 2.1. Okay, so if you only have one, not that useful. That's why if you get married, you'll hear people asking you, when are you going to have the second one? They need a partner. They need a playmate. All of that is meant to control you as a woman. It's part of the patriarchy. It's part of society trying to push and control you, right? Because any little thing that shifts or moves will dismantle the whole thing. We'll start dismantling the whole thing. Like, imagine if every single woman only had one kid, or not every single woman, but every woman that wants a kid only had one kid. Would that work? That wouldn't work, right? Because they need 2.1. They need a minimum of 2.1, right? Also, it wouldn't work for other reasons as well. If you have one child, it's still giving you more of an opportunity to run if the guy turns out to be a psycho, because it's not like you have 4 kids or 3, or now you got 2 that you have to worry about. You only got 1 kid, so you can be like, you know what, goodbye, right? So it's still giving you that level of flexibility. So I think the males just have a really big problem, because what they've built here is unsustainable from a biological level, from a societal level, and most importantly, nature wise, right? So yeah, that's the thing. Yeah, it's never real superiority, because by nature women are superior to males. I hate to say that, but it's the truth. Males are supposed to be helping. They're supposed to be helpers. They're supposed to be adding value, in the sense of taking away, like doing some of the harder things, like working the field or whatever, so that women don't have to, because we can do those things ourselves. We don't need a male to do any. There's nothing that a male, are things that a woman can do that a male cannot do. So you see how, like, that's how that works. So it's all fabricated. It's all artificial. It's artificial. And that's one of the biggest issues that males are facing currently. Because now that women are saying, I really don't want to do that. Like, I don't want to have a kid in my 20s, or the standards. I hear this young ladies talking in their vlogs. The standards they have for these males is insane. Like, it's really good. It's actually the bare minimum if you think about it, but it's insane because I don't see any males being able to reach it, because males are so subpar. It's basic things like emotional intelligence, like someone that is giving, generous. These are basic things to us as women, but males can't reach these things. So I don't really know. So even from that perspective, it's like such a big problem for the patriarchy, because now you have women with that's why they're changing laws, because they're trying to make it harder for you to get out. And I keep telling women, look, if you're in a relationship and you have any type of doubt whatsoever, get a divorce now, because they're trying to make it harder for you to get out of that dynamic. And so for a little while, it will do that. It will make it harder until human beings just stop caring and start doing whatever they want. That's what happens every time all throughout history. For a while, it will work. And then afterwards, humans just start, I don't know, they just start doing whatever, you know? And then then they have to reform their laws to match what people were already doing. It's so stupid. Like, I guess it's not stupid because it works, because so many people don't study and they don't read, so they just kind of assume that the government is looking out for their best interests, and that's where all these laws come from. No, it's based off of things that were already happening, like people unaliving each other. Making that illegal was based off of the fact that people were already unaliving each other, and it was nowhere to be found in the legal system as far as a consequence for that. But people were already doing it. So much so that it started becoming such a big problem that now the legal system comes in and says, well, maybe we should address this because it's preventing us from making as much money as we could be making. You know, or, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's causing more chaos. So the people come first and then the government comes later. But because people don't know that, it works, but it's not supposed to really work, right? Yeah, so being in proximity to a woman validates their existence, because without women, males don't exist. On a subconscious, they know males need us, and they know that. Yeah, it's not a subconscious. It's on a conscious level, they know that. They really do. They just don't want to. They just won't. They won't accept it. Right? They won't accept it as a reality, because then what are they going to control? You know, so they know it on a subconscious level, they know it on a biological level, but they also, most of the males know that on a conscious level. Okay. They know that, like, hey, you can't get here without a woman. Right. That's why they cling to the artificial construct, because everything that they cling to, listen to them when they speak, everything that they cling to, it's nothing based off of nature, it's nothing based off of biology, it's always based off of an artificial construct. Well, who created railroads? All of the machines that you have today, who created that? Like, you know, it's always something that's like not real. Right? It's artificially created. And also, not to mention that, like, they're so dumb when they say that, because so much of the technology was created by women. Women literally created the computer, the software, for imaging. What's that? What's the machine called where you're able to see the baby? Women created the intelligence software for that, you know? So it's like, it's so dumb. It's like selective idiocracy from the male's part. I don't treat them as if they don't know, because you can't be that dumb. There's no way. It's not possible that you could be that stupid, right? I treat it as like selective misogyny. Like, you're literally choosing to be a misogynist because you know that you otherwise will struggle to find a purpose to your existence. Okay. And they don't want to accept their purpose because their purpose puts them perceivably below the woman. So their purpose, and from what I can gather, the male's purpose is temporary. The males weren't really here to be here. They're not supposed to really be here for as long as they have been. And they're not supposed to be as many as they are today, which is why the world is in the state that it's in today. Okay. And that's why their chromosomes are devolving, because nature now has to come in and take care of that which women were supposed to take care of, but women weren't taken care of because of all of this artificial creations, right? So now you find that the male's chromosome is devolving. Ultrasound, yes, exactly, the ultrasound. The women created the software, the intelligence software for the ultrasound, right? So, you know, it doesn't even make any sense. Even with cars, they try to take credit for creating cars. Meanwhile, cars are made up of different components. even the simplest thing that's not so simple because you wouldn't be able to drive without it, like the windshield wipers. Women created that. Women invented that because you can't drive nowhere if it's raining. You don't got no windshield wipers. You're not gonna be able to see. So these things that come out of their mouth is like idiocracy at its finest. So I do not give them the benefit of the doubt saying like they don't know or it's subconscious. You can't be that dumb. You've got to know, right? So for sure. What was I saying anyway, so they know that they're below the women. The existence of males is so that women can reach the next level of evolution with more ease, because every baby starts out with XX. There's a reason for that. There's a reason why every baby starts out XX chromosomes, right? So their very existence is meant to be temporary. And ideally, women are the gatekeepers of that. But because of this artificial environment, now we have the world that we have today, which is a complete disaster. And so nature now has to take care of that which women were unable to take care of, which is why you see the literal XY chromosome devolving, why they're not able to evolve, right? So it's a whole scientific game, like not game, but it's like, it's really rooted in science, basically, is what I'm trying to say, the whole situation. Yeah, exactly. So women, women are like a force, like an energy field, and they're meant to exist and just exist. Like women are meant to exist on their own without the need of males or all these other things. And what ends up happening is, because of the artificial environment, you've made weaker women. So now you have weaker women. So what did you like? I don't know what they expected would happen. Now you have all these wars. You have all these DV violence, and you have you have women that are stuck in that from generation to generation, because the children are seeing that and they will replicate it, and that's the DNA that you are replicating, literally, even from a genetic standpoint. So it's a disaster. It's a complete mess, for sure. Yeah, it's such a dumb argument. Women would have created more if they were allowed to pursue those things. And women did do a lot despite forced to birth and take care of children. Exactly. Which is why women are able to kind of survive these hard times, but males are the ones devolving. Like, you see how women are able to just say, you know what, like, there's a lot of like questionable males out there. I don't know if they're into other males. I don't know what they're into. I'm just going to be over here. We're able to do that and be fine. Males are not. They don't have they literally don't have a reason to exist. They don't have a purpose if a woman is not attached to it. So you see it in the literal data, in the most literal sense possible. For example, most of the workforce is now made up of women. Why? Because males are refusing to work. They've stopped working. They don't want to work anymore. They're complaining about this, complaining about, oh, it's not a good environment. Meanwhile, for centuries, you've assuaged women, you've oppressed them, and we still worked. So they don't have the skill sets necessary to survive in nature, in a very real environment. They just can't survive. Yeah, and it's like the dumbest argument when they say things to me like that, because I'm like, so now so now you're showing me your lack of education, and I cannot be around someone that is that uneducated, because I'll get irritated. Like, with the most obvious. It's like, like it's obvious. Like, how can you say everything was created by a male? Like, that doesn't even make sense from a statistical, logical perspective. Everything though, like it doesn't even make sense. So the males have a tougher fight ahead of them, and even currently, because their biology doesn't support the artificial environment that they created. Their biological makeup doesn't support it. The artificial environment that they created says that they're supposed to be the providers. It says that they're supposed to be the protectors, and their biology doesn't support that. It doesn't support that. As soon as women enter the workforce, they're failing and flailing. Can't compete with women. Okay. You can't bring life with your body. Your body doesn't do anything. Now there's science out there where women can get pregnant without even needing you around. Women can support themselves. Even if they don't want to work, they can work and plan it out to where they can now be even pickier with their choice if they want a companion or how they want to live without you being around. So the core of the problem that they're having is that the artificial environment does not support the biology of males. They're incongruent. They don't fit. They don't go together, right? And then you say that you're protectors, yet most violent crimes and unaliving committed by males. See what I'm saying? Like, they created an artificial environment that has nothing to do with how they are biologically. It's like the complete opposite. Yet when women have children, most of the time women are the ones that have to protect those children, or the children don't have protection at all. There's no protection there. That's why, yet all of your insults are based off of women, though. Motherless behavior, motherless behavior, motherless behavior. Where's the father, though? But you want to call yourself a protector. So their biology does not support the artificial environment. So they are failing and flailing. Like, it's a disaster for males. Like, that they don't even know how to fix it. They don't even know what to do, and they're so dumb. That's why I call them dumb all the time. I call them dumb not because they don't know how to manipulate and gaslight. I call them dumb because it's just like the stuff, when you sit back and look at the decisions they make, it's so idiotic. Like, it's like, well, why would you do that? That doesn't even make any sense, right? Like, now they're, trying to figure out how to control women even more. Like, girl, what? That's going to be the exact opposite. More women are going to be like, no, thanks, because it's so hard to get out of one of those stupid contracts. I'm not getting into one of those. No, thanks. What do they think? Women are idiots? I don't know what they're thinking. Like, it's so insane. Like, they never account for evolution. That's their problem. They always live as if everything and every species will stay the same forever. And that is what ends up biting them every time, so it's just like, you can't protect, you can't provide. Women can do that for themselves now. So what did you think was going to happen? They're going to get, most of them, especially if they have an education, any type of education, even if it's just an associate's degree, they're going to get pickier. And as soon as you start doing stuff that they don't want or they don't like, they gone. What did you think was going to happen? Like, it doesn't even make sense. Like, what? So silly. Yeah, and males that use that argument are usually the ones who haven't done anything great. Like, why should we respect you because of your achievements of some other male? Yeah, exactly. They try to like make it seem like it's so embarrassing for them. Like, well, men are the ones that created this. Men are but you're not the one that created it. So why should I even speak to you? Like, give me the guy that created it. That's the guy I want to be talking to. Like, because why am I going to waste my time talking to you? You're not the one that created it. It's like when they say, like, that's why they hate men who have money. That's why they hate wealthy males, because they know that women don't want to talk to them. Like, we don't want to talk to you if you're like the regular person. Like, we want to talk to the male with the most money, and then start from there to see about character, to see about judgment, to see about emotional intelligence. Not even the most money, but like maybe the most generous, I would say, which is more of like a mental state. But you know, to them, to males, if you're the way that males think, they always reduce it to money. But women keep trying to say, like, explain from more of an emotional perspective, because that's how women view the world. Like, it's not really the money, say, per se, it's more the generosity. But they don't, you know, the men, they view the world from a different lens, so they don't view it in that way. But yeah, so when you don't come with any of those attributes, of course you're going to have a harder time getting the woman that you want. And it's a dumb complaint to me, because there's more than enough pick-me-shas out there. It's like, all you have to do is go get one of the pick-me-shas and live with her. Like, what is the problem? But then they want to sit here complaining to the rest of us just because we don't want that. Like, we don't want that because we're not dumb. Like, why would we sign up for something that's stupid? It's like a stupid deal. You know what I'm saying? It's like, what? Like, no thanks. Like, so it's so silly to me when they try to like make these arguments just because women say, well, this is what we want, and we want that, and we want that. And the saddest part is women that have a hard time asking for what they want. Girl, if that's what you want, that's what you want, point blank, period. And if he doesn't have it, he needs to move out the way. Okay? Like, that's literally it. But that's why they try to get you young, because most of the time it's women that are a little bit older that have that level of confidence. And they're going to be like, you know, I don't really want that. Even if what she's looking for is a good looking male, you know, she's not going to settle for an ugly male. You know, huh? She wants what she wants, and that's what she's going to get. Otherwise, I'm better off being single type of situation. So that leaves the males in a situation where they have no purpose. There's no purpose. And now they're concerned about birth rates. Well, guess who has the majority of control over birth rates? Who has the majority of control over taking care of the children? Women. It's like they gave it up. They gave up all that control, even the one that they could have potentially had by being decent fathers and being decent examples of males. They gave it all up. They gave up anything that they could potentially have in their favor, and they gave it to women. So now they don't even have that. Like, and you're not the one that's able to push that thing out of your body. Your body can't do jack squat. Like, so now what? Now what are you going to do? You know, I don't know what the males are going to do. I really don't. Like, but that's why you find most women are the ones that listen to male content creators that talk about feminism and talk about these things. It's a good thing what they're talking about, but it's not that useful, and it sucks for men because they're the ones that actually need to be listening to the message the most. So, like, we already know. That's what we've been saying for years. So we already know. We just like hearing it again and again and again. So it's like we already know what the truth is, but it's like pointless if the male is not going to try to direct that message in the right direction. It's not going to get them anywhere. It's not going to get us to being any closer to starting to choose these males. And I'm seeing it more and more. I'm telling you, these young women, the ones with an education, are more and more. That's why it drives males crazy. They're saying things like, I just want to work on myself. I just want to, you know, that's a problem when women start saying these type of things. When the girls start saying that, they know that it reduces their access to you. And the only thing they care about is access. That's all they care about having. They don't even care about you. They don't even view women as human beings. All they care about is access, power, control. The power and control comes into play if they feel like you're going to be more useful to them so that they can go back and YOLO it out the rest of the time. right? So they sniff you out. It's like predators, like hunters. They sniff it out. When I tell this story all the time where it's amazing to me. Males can literally smell fear. They can smell it from a mile away. It's so creepy. It's so creepy. Like, I've been in environments where I thought I was hiding it so well. I was like, but it was like a bunch of males around, and I was like, and they literally will say it to my face, not even knowing how creepy that is. They'll be like, "What's wrong? You seem scared." Oh, and then I get even more scared. I have like sweat and bullets. Like, what the heck? They can smell it, right? And so a lot of them choose women based off of these type of things, right? So if you don't air like someone that can be self-confident, if you're coming off as someone that's easy to manipulate, they will smell that on you and chase you and marry you based off of that, because males are using marriage for what it was intended. Okay. That's why it's women that are married that will always say dumb things like, "Oh, it's the other woman's fault." Meanwhile, he's the one that cheated on you. It's so dumb. Like, males are using marriage for what it was intended. You're the one that's not using it correctly. Okay. Marriage was intended to trap you. Okay. So that you're there doing all the other stuff that he don't want to do. Okay. So that's literally it. So they're going to go based off of, they usually will try to get a duplicate for their mom. They're going to go based off of which one's the closest to my mom, which one's going to be left with little options for actually leaving me. They have like a really weird codependency thing where they really, really, it's like they can't take it. Like, you're in the most danger when you try to leave as a woman. They can't take you leaving. So they go and they choose based off of that too. So when they get one trapped and secured, then the cheating starts, because they don't view marriage as what you're talking about, right? So once they accomplish that, now they're like, okay, I'm good. I got that set up. I'll get my stuff washed and cleaned every day. I'll get all that free service. Now I can go, do what I want to do over here. That's how they use it. That's how they view it. So it's super, super crazy. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So anyway, I feel like that's a long enough live. I always come in feeling like, oh, I'm just going to do maybe like an hour and some change at most. And then it goes a little bit longer when I'm talking about these kinds of topics, because these are the kinds of topics that I find the most interest in. So we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. But I think that's the most important thing as far as being an independent pretty girly is like, the biggest thing to start with is financial independence. You can't even build confidence until you have that locked in, because in order to lock that in, it takes a lot of showing up for yourself, and that is what's going to help with your confidence building when you show up for yourself. So if you have like low self-confidence, you have to build up your self-confidence. And my recommendation would be to build that up before you start, if you're trying to date males, before you start entertaining any males. Because like I said, the males hunt based off of practicalities, what will literally benefit them. And on a mass scale, if you're self-confident, that doesn't benefit the male, because then you can leave more easily. You can have more of a life. They don't want that. You're not as easy to mold. That's why a lot of them go for younger women that don't have as much life experience. So build the self-confidence first if you want to be an independent pretty girly in every aspect of your life, not just relationships. You have to be so confident in yourself that you are able to take yourself out to eat. I take myself out to eat all the time. Like, I just go, and I kind of get upset if I'm interrupted while trying to relax, because I use it as self-care. you know. So you have to be comfortable going out to eat by yourself, for example. And when you go out to eat, you have to be comfortable not looking through your phone or distracting yourself with anything, and just existing. Like if you're not able to do these things, because these are kind of basic things, they're like basic examples, then you're going to struggle with that self-confidence piece. You have to have your own things. I'm a firm, giant believer in having your own assets. I'm so sorry, but you can't tell me otherwise. If you're married and you don't have your own house somewhere, sitting somewhere where you're renting it out to someone, you don't have your own stocks, your own financial accounts, you're not independent. I'm so sorry. You're not. You're playing a basic level game where you are literally prey and you're trapped there. Like no one can tell me anything when it comes to that. It's like that's the bare minimum. You have to have your own stuff. Tangible resources that are survival linked, right? So house, shelter, survival, right? Stocks, money, resources, food, survival, right? It all kind of comes down to like having that basic attribute locked in before you even entertain or think about any males. That has to be locked in, because you could think that this male is great. He comes and now his number one priority is to literally destroy you because you're doing better than him. And you'll never know, because it's like psychological games. But before you know it, you wake up the next day, you don't have anything to show for the 2 years or 3 years. All you have is this male. That's a problem. So you have to have it locked in. Like you have to have those stocks already have to be building, right? Already there, separate. You don't even tell him about that. I wouldn't tell anyone about that, or any male about that. Have your own house that you can just have on the side and rent out to other people. If you want to live with a male. I don't support living with males, but I know that I know women are just not, a lot of women are just not strong enough to live outside of patriarchal roles. So even if you're not able to do that, make sure you have your own house, your own asset, okay? And that you're doing your own thing on the side and you just rent it out and you're like making money off of it. And then you put that money into stocks or into getting even more assets. Okay. Can't tell me nothing about, I will die on a hill, right? On this first thing that has to be there for you to be an independent girl. If you don't have that, you're not independent. You're trapped and you don't even know that you're trapped. Okay. Have your own transportation, like your own vehicle in your own name that you own fully. And that includes, because everything that I'm listing, it's not just males that you have to look out for. That includes things like the government, like owing debt. You got to be careful with debt, because all these things can also control you and limit your freedom. There's good debt. There's debt that makes more sense to have. Then there's debt that you shouldn't have after a certain point. I think having a car, having transportation is one of those debts that you should hurry up and have full possession and ownership of, because that's transportation. That translates to survival in the modern world, right? So you have to have that in your name. So all of these foundational things, if that's the starting point, that's barely 101. That's barely like status starting from there. If you don't have these things, then you're not independent. If you don't have that separated and you're talking about 4B and you're married and you don't even have these things, the only house you have is joint to a male, what are we even doing here? What are we even talking about? The only assets that you have is tied to a male. Your vehicles are all tied together. You're the last person that needs to be talking about 4B, because there's It doesn't make sense. You're literally like this. You're glued to another human being. So what does that mean? That means you probably just settled. And now you're telling other women to settle too. That doesn't make sense, right? Well, you're telling other women to settle too through your lifestyle, through your actions, but then giving incongruent information through your messaging and your verbal messaging, right? So it's not making sense. So I think that's the biggest piece to start with. There's so many pieces to it, but to start with, that financial piece has to be locked in, and it has to be locked in beyond just thinking about males. Okay, life is more than males. Okay, like it has to be locked in thinking about things like, when I get old, how am I going to make sure that I lock this in so my future isn't dependent on the government sending me checks, because that's going to be non-existent by the time you get old. I promise you that. Okay, because they already they didn't think about the future generations when building this. So you're going to get old, that support is not going to be there. And even if it's there, it's not going to be enough to support whatever lifestyle that you have or that you should have by the time you're that age. So the society does not support kids. The society does not support future generations. You have to think about these things. So how am I going to set this up? Right? So that even if I do want to deal with males, it's a reality that I'm choosing. It's set up in the way that I want. It's set up in a way that's the most beneficial to me. And it's set up in a way that allows me to live life to the fullest extent. And that starts with being independent. That's what they don't want you to know. That's why they demonize the word independent for women. There was this video I put in one of my podcasts where the guy was like, we don't like women that use the word independent. Well, that's a red flag. If you don't like women that are independent, what are you looking for? A woman that's not independent? Because you want her just to be like this on you, like dependent on you and have her whole thing depending on you. Either that, or you want her walking on eggshells just to avoid describing herself as independent. It makes no sense, right? Like, so that's not a life that's it's not worth living your life in that way as a woman. When you are, you're literally the leader, you literally, nothing can go around you. That's why the males freak out, and that's why they try their best to get control and power over the source itself, which is you. Okay. That's why they've been doing that for years. Nothing can flow around you, and you have to flow and resonate with nature. Okay. Which means coming to the very real acceptance that you are the protector, you are the provider. These males can't do it. They never could. Okay. And they are below women. And even if you tell them, if you confront males with that, they won't really argue with you. They'll just try to gaslight you. You'll never really, most of the time, they can't really argue. They can just gaslight, because by the time you hit them with, well, are you able to have children and bring them into this world with your body? The most basic argument ever. What are they going to say? Can't say anything about it. Then they might say, well, you need a man to do that. And then you say, well, actually, we don't. The technology has replaced you there too. Okay. So it doesn't make sense. By the time you start talking about empathy, feelings, all these things that they don't understand, even if we're not talking about kids, what are they going to do? As far as they don't even understand what those things mean, they can't argue against it. Right. So we don't even have to talk about kids to see the dissonance there. So yeah, so for this for this episode, that's the biggest takeaway I feel like, is to start out being an independent pretty girly means setting yourself up from the foundation, from a foundational level, and not just thinking about males, this, males, that, blah, 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 right? This goes beyond that. If you're going to have kids, do you want to bring them here only to burden them by them having to take care of you when you're old because you didn't set it up correctly? Now these kids have to take care of you, and most of them end up not even taking care of the parents themselves because they have a life to live of their own. You got to think of your future generations if you're going to do that. You can't just think of yourself and dip out later and be like, see ya, it doesn't make any sense. So all of the financial piece, because finances boil down to resources, which boils down to survival in the modern world, have to be set in place. I'm tired of hearing about males assuaging women and all these other things. I'm so sick of it. So this has to be the first step, because if you don't have your own resources, if you don't have your own stuff set up, you're going to be literally stuck there. You literally will be stuck there. But if you at least have your own resources, then just by building that, you've built a certain level of cognitive competence. You've built a certain level of confidence, right? If you don't have any of those things, you just jump right in it and you haven't built anything because you're too lazy, you don't want to work. Now you're trapping future generations into that. Like, what are you really doing? You're not doing anything. You're just kind of taking up space, right? So that's what I think. That's what I believe. So we'll kind of end this live on that note, but we'll be talking more about how to be an independent pretty girly in real life. We'll be incorporating a lot more of that into the content, just especially with 2025 starting out, because I think it's really important. I didn't really realize how much the topic needed to be addressed until I started talking about other things. And I started to see, oh, okay, there might be a little bit of a disconnect between what it means to actually be an independent pretty girly in real life versus like just calling yourself independent just because. And so we'll be incorporating a lot more of that in real life as well, or talking about what that looks like in real life as well. But yeah, that's kind of, I think, the biggest takeaway for this live. But thanks for joining me today. I got some really, really good feedback, some really, really good questions. And I know it's Christmas. So if you celebrate Christmas or the holidays, happy holidays. Stay cozy and warm. And I will see y'all in the next one. Bye.